Welcome to the February 18th, 2021 school board meeting. This meeting is now in session and is being conducted by electronic communications using Microsoft Teams due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency. We are now ready to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We are now at citizen comment. The school board welcomes public comment from community members. Due to the pandemic, we have revised our speaker process. Currently, we only allow call-in speakers who have signed up in advance and have limited the total time for speakers to no more than 1 hour at each meeting. As the board transitions to in-person meetings in March, our speaker process will be adjusted, and I'll share that information a little later on in our meeting this evening. Directions for signing up to speak are posted on our website. The speaker form is posted on the Friday afternoon prior to the board meeting and is active until 4 p.m. the following Tuesday. To ensure that as many individuals as possible have the opportunity to sign up to speak, we will not limit signups. However, we will use a lottery system to assign speaker slots when we receive more than 30 signups for meeting. If needed, an online list generator will be used to randomly select up to 35 speakers. The first 30 speakers are given speaker slots, and the additional 5 are waitlisted in case any speakers withdraw. Tonight, 24 speakers have signed up, so before they begin, I'm going to review our approved speaker guidelines. During virtual meetings, we will hear all public comments at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers should call 10 minutes prior to the meeting start and will be announced in the order their call is received. Before you speak, please turn down the sound on all electronic devices and please do not use a speakerphone because that can distort the sound and make your comments difficult for us to understand. Each speaker may speak for up to 2 minutes and a timer will keep track of your time. The timer begins when you start speaking, so please conclude your remarks when the buzzer sounds and the operator will disconnect your call at 2 minutes. The school board does not respond to public comments during the meeting. If follow-up is required due to the nature of the comments, the superintendent will work with the board clerk to follow up with speakers accordingly. Please email any written comments to school.board@apsva.us, and please be sure to state your name and the topic that you're going to be speaking about when you begin. And Dr. Cannon will also help us keep track of our time as well. And I'd like to invite our clerk, Ms. Elliott, to give us the name of the first speaker, please.
Our first speaker this evening is Laura Daly Sims.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Lara Daly Sims. I'm speaking on return to school. Tyrone and I have kids at Yorktown and Swanson. I want to note my appreciation for Dr. Duran's measured approach to reopening classrooms by prioritizing health and safety and by following the science. With classrooms reopening soon, I encourage APS to continue to follow the science by undertaking a few achievable measures that conform to guidance from the CDC, ASHRA, and Harvard School of Public Health. While there is no such thing as zero risk in anything we do, it's still important to reduce risks to the extent possible, and there is still time to do so before classrooms reopen. First, APS needs to make sure there is good air filtration in every classroom. Portable air cleaners with HEPA filters should be properly placed in each classroom and other relevant spaces in the building, especially cafeterias and gyms. It's great that APS already bought a lot of air cleaners, which I believe are sized for 500 square foot rooms. However, rooms larger than that will need more than one air cleaner. Second, APS should achieve an air exchange rate of 5 to 6 changes of clean air every hour for every classroom. On Harvard's scale, a rating of 4 ACH is, quote, good, but it's also in the, quote, bare minimum category. And Harvard's Guide to Checking Ventilation focuses on getting classrooms to 5 air exchanges. In a tweet describing his work, Dr. Joseph Allen from Harvard wrote, quote, for classrooms, we recommend aiming for 5 air changes per hour. Simply adding an extra air cleaner to some rooms would get them to 5 ACH. Third, APS should update its mask policy in accordance with last week's CDC guidance to require universal and correct mask wearing at all times when inside an APS building. Finally, the CDC continues to classify indoor dining as a highest risk activity. Really, indoor dining undercuts the other mitigation strategies that APS has been diligently working to implement. I therefore encourage APS to adopt a county-wide default to daily outdoor meals, regardless of weather, and to work with individual schools to implement that directive. This sets the strong, consistent expectation that all students at all schools, from Jamestown to Carlin Springs, have the opportunity for the healthiest dining option every day they're at in-person school. Thank you.
Thank you very much for calling in. If you would like, please go ahead and send your full comments to school.board@apsba.us so we can hear everything that you wanted us to know tonight. Ms. Elliott, will you please call the next speaker?
Our next speaker is Christine Boland.
My name is Christine Boland, and I'm an APS teacher. APS needs a robust testing protocol for asymptomatic and symptomatic staff and students. The best K-12 systems in the country use a multi-layered strategy that incorporates surveillance testing of 10 to 20% of each school weekly using rapid antigen testing. Positive tests in the absence of symptoms are then followed up on and confirmed. Negative rapid test results, in cases where symptoms are present, should be retested. People must quarantine while waiting for test results when exposed or symptomatic. Precise, timely contact tracing and quarantining are just as important as the test itself for mitigation. Wastewater testing could be a helpful and cheap surveillance testing alternative, letting APS know which school sites have asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic positive cases that other testing and symptom screening protocols would miss. If we're serious about keeping COVID out of our schools, this is essential. We also need clarity and transparency to build trust. We should have the following insights. Which schools have new active cases among in-person participants in the past week, and how many cases are there? How many past and current total cases does a school have among in-person students and staff? This data should be broken out separately by staff and students. These two groups should not be lumped in together. If an athletic team is affected, this should also be listed clearly and separately. Fully virtual staff and students should also be tracked, but this data should not be grouped together with in-person participants. If our mitigation strategies are effective, we will see that reflected in the in-person data. If they are ineffective, we should look at that head-on and revise our plans. So far, the level of information provided by APS obscures facts and raises fear and distrust. In the meantime, please at least move lunch outdoors and get those HEPA filters into the classrooms as promised. There isn't one in my classroom yet, but I have to report in 12 days. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Jeff Martin.
Dr. Duran and school board members, my name is Jeff Martin, and I'm a community member and the husband of an APS teacher. As we move towards reopening, I encourage you to prioritize the things that will minimize the, honestly, very high-risk teachers, staff, and students. First off, ensure every classroom has a HEPA filter and that it's positioned correctly in the center of the room. Rooms larger than 500 square feet should have 2 filters. Delay the return of staff who have yet to receive vaccinations. We're on track to have all APS staff vaccinated by early April. There's no reason other than impatience and short-sightedness to pull at-risk staff back before that. You must also ramp up outreach to BIPOC communities whose vaccination rates are low. Many distrust the county administration and the vaccine, and every person who opts out of the vaccine is a potential spreader. Make good on your promise to implement a rigorous testing program. Wastewater testing is a must-have to identify schools that are starting to see cases before they become widespread. Random asymptomatic testing of 20% of students and staff weekly with rapid antigen testing is also critical. Provide accommodations to all staff who have a pre-existing condition. There's a survey going around asking for staff members' experiences with accommodations, and honestly, it's horrendous. People are being asked to give APS access to their entire medical history before even being considered for accommodations, and even then they're being declined. That's heartless and it's dangerous. Move lunch outside or end in-person instruction before lunch. Having 300 kids maskless in a building at one time is a clear threat and goes against all the other mitigation strategies that APS is trying to put in place, not to mention going against CDC guidance. If you follow these guidelines, we may return with little risk. Move quickly, though, and you risk being responsible for the deaths of teachers, staff, and community members. These are your decisions to make, but their consequences will affect us all. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Melissa Dario.
Hi, my name is Melissa Dario. To Dr. Duran and APS, I want to thank you for your thoughtful approach to returning to in-person learning and prioritizing safety. And to all of our teachers, staff, and principals who might be listening tonight, thank you. You continue to do EPS to what's the unimaginable, the unthinkable, and you continue to work so hard in the interest of our students, constantly pivoting, all the while dedicating everything you can to our children. With hybrid learning in person starting very soon, I encourage APS to continue to follow the science by implementing a few measures that conform to guidance from the CDC, ASHRA, and Harvard School of Public Health. Indoor dining is one of the highest risk activities. It is counterintuitive to all other mitigation strategies that APS has been working so strategically to make happen. There needs to be a county-wide guidance for daily outdoor meals in less than extreme cases, and that doesn't mean just rain or cold. APS should make sure there is good filtration for every classroom. Portable air cleaners with HEPA filters should be properly placed. APS should achieve an air exchange rate of 5 or 6 changes of clean air every hour for every APS classroom. While a rating of 4 clean air changes is listed as good by Harvard, their guide to checking ventilation is all about giving rooms to over 5 clean air changes in their formula. We could reduce infection risk by 33% in many classrooms just by jumping from 3 to 4 or 5 clean air changes. It's so easy to fix this. Just add a second air cleaner to the 1 out of 4 rooms that need it. I do ask why you would leave so many classrooms at a higher risk of transmission than everyone else. And we don't know which classrooms. Is it my child? Is it my friend's child? It's unfortunate that some of our older and worse-maintained buildings will now have higher risks for kids inside the classroom because not everyone will be at the same level of clean air during a pandemic. If APS is going to continue with just okay air standards for some classrooms.
I'm sorry your time is up, but we thank you for calling in to share your thoughts this evening. Ms. Elliott, may we have the next speaker?
Next, we have Alessandra Bacai.
Good evening, Dr. Duran and school board members. I'm Alessandra Bacai, a social studies teacher at Yorktown High School. My concerns today surrounding the return to school plan stem from a significant disconnect between those in leadership roles at APS, ELT, DTL, and principals, and those of us with student-facing responsibilities. Staff have a considerable number of questions on the macro and micro scale that deserve clear and consistent answers before we welcome students back into physical classroom spaces over the next couple of weeks. In no particular order, what is the benchmark for reverting back to virtual instruction should that be necessary? If we are exposed at school and need to quarantine, will we be required to use our personal leave even if we are still able to perform our role virtually? What about if we are exposed outside of school and need to quarantine yet can still perform our role virtually? A number of us have had to quarantine, myself included, over the past month, but I have not missed a day of work, which means my students have not missed a single synchronous day with their teacher. Will this change? Are there enough adults to cover classes if our colleagues are out for any reason so that teachers maintain their planning time while also not overburdening our instructional assistants who fulfill their own vital role? What communication has gone out to parents for whom the concurrent model will be in practice? Are families who selected hybrid aware that their students may be learning from an overflow room due to space constraints? Who decides which students will not be in our classroom in front of us? Who is responsible for monitoring the overflow rooms? Once again, teachers and staff are left to just figure it out, which requires many extra hours of preparation on top of what we are already doing. Leadership needs to experience firsthand what student-facing staff will need to do and what we are currently doing. A school system cannot effectively run on theoretical models. Finally, where are the student voices in all of this? My high school students have these same questions and others of their own that deserve answers. Will you answer for them? Thank you.
And thank you for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Summer Tarplay.
Hi. My name is Summer Tarplay. I'm a 5th grader at APS, and I believe that we should not go back to school for at least the rest of the school year. I believe this because virtual learning is going well for at least me and most of the people in my class. I really don't think it is worth risking COVID just so that things could get a little bit better or seem more normal. I worry that kids and teachers are going to get sick from going back to school. Teachers haven't gotten children haven't gotten the vaccine, and some may not be able to. This makes kids an easy way to spread coronavirus. The teachers may not have enough antibodies to work productively against COVID or the new wave. Also, the COVID tests are not very reliable. I know this because it was proven and it happened to my dad. The test was negative, but soon after the symptoms showed. This means that a kid or teacher could get COVID and nobody would know until the symptoms showed. This means that, lastly, I believe that it took us a long time to get used to remote learning. I worry that changing could be stressful and counterproductive, especially if we have to switch back because someone got COVID. I believe the question we should be asking ourselves is it really worth it? Thank you for listening to my reasons why we should not go back to school yet.
And thank you for calling in to give us your thoughts on that. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Maylee Han.
Hi, my name is Maylee Han, and I am a junior at Wakefield High School. I feel like you are only listening to a vocal minority of parents and not the students regarding the proposed return to school plan. So, I want to be a representative for all the students in APS. I decided to create an anonymous survey asking high school students if they feel safe going back. There were 51 responses across the 5 high schools, and 72.5% did not feel safe going back to school. Here are some of the comments from your students. It is unbelievable that people's lives are being put at risk to appease parents demanding in-person schooling. It's very irresponsible to send so many people back when we are in no position to do so and will be endangering hundreds. My dad is type 2 diabetic. I wouldn't want anything to happen to him. High schoolers are the most exposed out of all students. We have adult bodies that can transmit like an adult. We don't have the option to get a vaccine yet. We do not feel safe. Personally, I feel like the return to school plan shouldn't even be an option. It is morally wrong to put the students into buildings when it is not safe. Don't you care about your students, your staff, your teachers? All of my teachers this year are bending over backwards to make sure we are getting properly educated through this situation. If you truly care about your students like you say you do, you won't be risking our lives. It seems very wrong that you're listening to the parents instead of the kids. Are the parents going to the buildings? No. Are parents enrolled at an APS school? No. So why? Why are you making us risk our lives? I was reading over your mission statement on your website. It is as follows: to ensure that all students learn and thrive in a safe, healthy, and supportive learning environment. I'm learning safely, I am healthy, and I have a supportive learning environment. Why endanger me? What happens when your teachers pass away? It's not like you can just pick another teacher off a tree and throw them in the classroom. So I am urging you to stop this plan. Stop this plan and start putting energy into bettering our virtual learning environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Julie Hannock.
Hi, this is Julie Hannock, and I'm calling in on Return to School. I want to thank Dr. Duran, all the teachers and staff for their efforts in returning to in-person instruction. I know there's going to be some bumps, and there's a few things that won't go exactly the way everyone thinks they will, but I do think the effort is worth it, and we want to thank you for making that effort. Of course, I have masks, so I wouldn't be on the call. I guess there's 2 different things, and they're somewhat related. One of them's paper, and one of them's recess. So on the paper side, Joseph Allen, who we all know has done so much great work on getting back to school, he wrote a Washington Post editorial op-ed about 2 months ago, and in the op-ed they wrote, "We don't have a single documented case of COVID-19 transmission from surfaces, not one. Although spread is common from contaminated surfaces for other viruses, we don't see the same thing on coronavirus." So with this in mind, I'm kind of confused about the expectation that even once hybrid starts, some schools have said they're not going to use paper, and we're still going to see the iPad and the use, particularly in elementary school. We're still going to see the iPad used. Is it a policy to not use paper? I remain confused why some schools over the course of last year have done more packets, or actually the last 6 months have done more packets, and others have not. They said there's a policy against it. For my son who has an IEP, the ability to have paper, real physical material in front of him would have enhanced his learning experience, and I was told the policy is against it. So I just don't quite understand why this has been in place. And in fact, when you look at what the Distance Learning Task Force is saying, that the kids need more physical presence for distance learning, so I think that should go across the board. All of these children need more physical materials. The second item I just want to touch on is sorry,
That's okay. If you wouldn't mind, please send your comments to us in writing at school.board@apsva.us. We appreciate you calling in today. Miss Elliott, may we have the next speaker, please?
Our next speaker is Chloe Farag.
Good evening. I am Chloe Farrow, a VPI teacher at Barcroft. I thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight in support of safe meals. No one is arguing that indoor dining is best. The science is clear. Outdoor eating is safest. Until we install UV germicidal protection in cafeterias, outdoor lunches are our only truly safe option. As a VPI teacher, I have been doing meals in the classroom for years. In a pandemic, I see issues with classroom meals beyond the obvious germs being spread by unmasked students. We are also going to tax our already overburdened custodial staff with increased demand to service multiple classrooms after meals. Custodial staff are vital to our safe reopening. We need to ensure our meal plan doesn't take their jobs from incredible to impossible. We also stand to lose time. Time better spent supporting our students' academics will now be devoted to the logistics of teaching staff setting up and clearing up after meals in classrooms daily. Those minutes add up over time. This loss becomes exponentially greater when you consider breakfast. With the rolling bus schedules we have been told to expect, students will need breakfast served in the classrooms over the course of an hour or more. That is time teaching staff is not able to focus on academics. That is time all students and staff in the room will be exposed to unmasked peers. What can be done? Well, as a school system, we can commit to two essential points. First, let's bag breakfast so we can focus on lunch. Offer a bagged breakfast to take home each afternoon for the following school day. Or even provide a week's worth of breakfast once a week, as some other school systems are doing. Second, but just as important, make outdoor lunch the standard for APS until the pandemic ends or we install UV germicidal units in all cafeterias. Together, let's take COVID off the menu. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Natalie Bakuli.
Hello, my name is Natalie Backley, and I am a registered nurse and have a master's in psychology. I'm also a mother of 3 to a 10, 8, and 5-year-old. 2 of my children attend APS, but my youngest has been in-person learning at a Catholic school since September, where there have been 0 cases of COVID. My husband is also a frontline worker. We realized the decision to close schools initially was reasonable, but we now know so much more. With proper mask wearing, hand washing, and 3 to 6 feet of distancing, schools are not high-risk venues for COVID transmission. The children have suffered long enough. Children in all grade levels, K through 12, are suffering socially, academically, and mentally. Many students have at least one failing grade. Depression rates and suicide rates are on the rise. The time to help these kids is now. Teachers are vaccinated, and plans are in place to open for hybrid. Schools need to be open 5 days a week. Schools across this country and in this very county have been successfully opened for 5 days in-person instruction. They are doing it safely, and so can we. I want to thank all the administration and staff for being prepared and excited to open for hybrid. The science is clear, and the CDC has given us the tools, Let's be responsible adults and let's open schools. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Jennifer Wheelock.
My name is Jennifer Wheelock, and tonight I implore the school board to bring greater urgency to prioritize and resource the needs of students with special education needs. My daughter is in second grade. She is a great kid, smart, creative, and loves cats. She is also dyslexic. She has amazing reading comprehension, but can't read. She knows the answers, but can't write. And for the last year, APS has been in violation of her IEP. Because of the pandemic, she received almost no meaningful services last spring. Last fall, her school suggested cutting her hours because of the restrictions of virtual school. We declined. She needed more assistance, not less. But we also understood her teachers could not create more hours in the day. At a recent meeting, we were shocked from their ample data that she is still at a kindergarten level in reading, math, and writing. Yet they suggested again to cut her services with no meaningful option to otherwise meet her needs. At present, without push-in support, her second grade education largely consists of a couple of IEP classes and completing some maps. Would you describe that as a free and appropriate public education? To be clear, I do not blame her teachers. This story can be told by special education families across the APS. However, for our family, we face the challenge of moving her into third grade more than 2 years behind. In first grade, she began to socially retreat, walking in pensive circles on the playground, calling herself dumb, hiding her inability to read. First grade. The past year has been an emotional respite for her, but without urgency to address her academic needs, she will again be at risk. So again, thank you for listening, and thank you for your service in this challenging year.
And thank you for taking the time to call us and let us know about your situation. May we have the next speaker, please?
Our next speaker is Deanna Caputo.
Hello, my name is Deanna Caputo, and I'm a parent of a kindergartner and a fourth grader. You're doing the right thing by opening schools now, even without everything perfectly in place. As we approach the one-year mark since schools closed, I want to remind everyone of a school board discussion that took place about procuring iPads for elementary school students on February 20th, 2020 board meeting. At the time, I appreciated the concerns of the board members, recognizing that electronic devices and screen time on developing brains is just bad. I'm now going to quote that transcript. Quote, I think we've gone too far. I think the technology has overtaken us, has overtaken our children. I would be a supporter of pulling that back K to 5 after what I heard about the psychological impact and the deficit that children are acquiring in words and skills and empathy because we're overusing devices. I think we're going to have to think about leading on this. I think we should be extremely mindful and err on the side of really pulling back on how much we're using and the devices, really use them mindfully. I don't think giving them unfettered access to devices at the elementary level is doing them a service. I really think we need to be pulling this back. I'm really afraid. We really need to hear the information I heard last night about the psychological impact of these devices, the way it is getting in the way of kids learning. We need to attend to the actual research that is getting in the way of kids learning words and how to talk. It is getting in the way of kids looking at each other in the eye and talking to adults and learning how to have empathy. We really, really have to attend to this. I'm really kind of desperate about this. We have kids who can't write. We're told in research that you learn the material and handwrite the notes. I would like to know, how do we dial this back? How do we make sure we're attending to the kids' social and emotional needs? How do we make sure that we're delivering those things in the curriculum, those things that are supposed to be in the curriculum? We need to say what it is that we're not supposed to do, and how do we dial these devices? If that means we need to put a moratorium on the use of them, I'm all for that at this point, because I'm actually scared of what we've been doing. I think we've gone too far. I really like the staff to listen to that research about what we're doing to our kids, end quote. COVID has not changed this risk. And although it was acceptable for 2 months in spring when we didn't have data, it isn't anymore after almost 6 months of neglecting and damaging our children psychologically. Now for today's slide.
Thank you very much for calling in. Feel free to send your comments to school.board@apsva.us. Ms. Elliott, may we have the next speaker, please?
Our next speaker is Deborah Walden.
Hello, my name is Deborah Waldron, and I've been teaching in APS for 27 years. My son is an APS middle school student. I do not agree with the decision to bring us back into the building, at least not yet. Our case level per 100,000 people stands at four times the CDC's recommended benchmark. And even though our post-spring break return would guarantee a fully vaccinated workforce, no teacher will have reached full immunity from their vaccines when they report to work on Tuesday. Regardless, though, we must remember that this 3.5-month return to the building will not be some magic panacea that fixes the woes of virtual teaching. Kids are not going to magically catch up. But there is a solution. If APS is truly committed to our kids, if this return to the building is about education and not optics, then the budget you present next week will move away from planning factors and instead mandate a maximum elementary class size of 18 and a maximum secondary class size of 24. It will mandate that any secondary class for struggling students also run at 18. Please, stop using the planning factor that allows the law of averages to hide large classes, such as an AP Physics course of 35, nurse space class of 32, or any of the 20 other science classes at Yorktown with a 30-plus enrollment. Mandate maximums and provide the resources for courses to run at lower levels when needed. Any move to raise class sizes or even maintain the current planning factor level will show loud and clear that this move to concurrent teaching was never about kids and never about learning. We're a school, an organization based on doing what's right by kids. The number one thing you can do to help our kids, all of them, is to dramatically reduce class sizes. There are obvious solutions and easy solutions. Class sizes should drive the budget, but for the past 10 to 12 years, the budget has driven class sizes. It's been unacceptable, and the pandemic has only exacerbated the problem. A budget that puts kids first, one that makes the financial choices needed to reduce class sizes to 18 and 24, will demonstrate the leadership that APS needs, put the educational needs of APS students first, and will finally allow teachers to truly excel at the jobs we put our heart and soul into. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Josh Folb.
On behalf of the Arlington Education Association, my name is Josh Folb. In my 21 years of teaching, I have learned one truth. When something goes wrong in schools, someone will get fired and everyone must take a class. But below the surface was the actual commitment that there were many people who knew what was going wrong and they all failed to act. COVID-19 cannot be like every other situation in my career because a wrong decision could mean somebody dies. The CDC guidelines say it is possible with strict adherence to mitigations to open schools. 6 feet, masks, ventilation, and staying home when you've been exposed or feeling unwell, but strict adherence. The return to buildings is happening, so we have to agree from the beginning, 100% compliance with the mitigations 100% of the time. When staff members or students fully capable of doing the right thing choose not to, it must be dealt with the first time. We cannot get to a situation when an outbreak occurs and somebody dies, only to pull security footage and clearly see the mitigations were not being followed. The Arlington Education Association insists on 100% compliance with mitigations from its members, and we expect the same commitment from the school board and executive leadership team. Say it tonight. We expect nothing less than 100% compliance with the mitigations 100% of the time. It is important that everyone in APS follow this 100% commitment. This pandemic is very real, and as we share spaces in APS, we are responsible for each other. There have been cases of COVID in schools, and to stop the spread, mitigation must be followed. 100% compliance, 100% of the time, no exceptions. Thank you.
And thank you for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Gia Bellato.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Gia Bellato. I want to share some of the questions and comments that teachers have shared with me. Things like how many in-person subs do they know they have on hand, and what will trigger a classroom shutdown if someone becomes infected. If a student has symptoms, do they go to the isolation room and get sent home? But we don't quarantine until there's a positive case reported. What if that student doesn't get tested or the parent doesn't report the case? How do we protect the other students and their families? Why don't we have accommodations for high-risk employees? The CDC guidelines say we should. The Virginia Department of Health guidelines say we should. Why were people with high-risk family members denied outright? And why aren't pregnant women being accommodated? Another said, I am being forced into an unpaid leave because I don't have childcare. My son was denied hybrid, and I have been denied to continue teaching virtually. Another teacher said, there isn't even time to hire new staff and bring them on board. If I'm not there, who covers my responsibilities? I know it's not my problem to solve, but what will happen with my kiddos and my school? What does that mean on a grander scale for APS? We keep talking about lunch outdoor and alternatives, yet we're still planning on breakfast in the classroom. We need to not eat in the classroom, ever. Another said, students are not passive actors, and many, even those excited to be going back, share our concerns. I'd like the board, Dr. Duran, and those community members who listen to these meetings to be aware that no, it isn't just a fringe group of zealot staff who would feel safer with these things. It's also the students we serve. The mental health of school staff in the aggregate has taken hit after hit, with very little guidance, transparency, and a lack of respect for their different concerns related to safety. Once again, teachers are left to answer all of these questions and figure out procedures. How do we let kids use the bathroom? Who supervises them on their way to lunch? How should we have the students enter and exit the room? How do we teach kids the new behavioral expectations? What are the behavioral expectations? School-based staff will be the ones left scrambling to make it work for the kids because they're the ones on the front line. Thank you.
And thank you for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Kayla Owen.
My name is Kayla Owen, and I'm speaking on return to school. As the daughter of a three-time school superintendent who went on to be the assistant superintendent of the state of Washington, I'm all too familiar with the behind-the-scenes sacrifices of your job. I want to acknowledge the sleepless nights, the nightly meetings that go until the wee hours of the morning, the interactions with students that rob you of words for fear you will be overcome with emotion, and the worries for families, fairness, and futures that bring you to tears. It is not only true of your position as superintendent, but every one of your teachers. I want you to know that I see you, and I acknowledge that this is probably the most difficult and sustained situation any educator, teacher, or otherwise has had to deal with in our lifetime. Teachers deserve our respect, our grace, and our most flexible selves. Teachers are not robots. They are our partners with whom we entrust our children. Teachers are literally holding it together while there is a fire burning around them. The concurrent model is lacking evidence that it is effective for 3rd to 5th grade students. So why are 3rd to 5th grade teachers being expected to implement the concurrent hybrid model when Bridget Loft in the fall stated this model would never be appropriate for any age group other than high school students? We are already asking teachers to perform superhuman tasks, and now we are literally asking them to run in-person and virtual classes simultaneously. Will those who remain virtual become second-class citizens? That's not equitable. Will the students who are learning in person be expected to behave like robots and stay behind partitions with a teacher on a screen? I do not know of a single educator who believes this is an appropriate model for 3rd to 5th graders. Despite their superhuman powers of our teachers, this is not going to work. I would like to ask district staff, along with every administrator and school board member, to spend an entire day in one of these concurrent classes and let us know how it works. We need to go back to the drawing board and get input of people that know their students best. To the Kirsten Wallachs, the Megan O'Briens, the Tarek Wizdalas, the Ashley Bergers, the Tiffany Kerrs, thank you for loving our children. Thank you for showing grace and adding that extra word of encouragement. It is your grace, kindness, and perspective that all of our students will remember about this pandemic, not any academic skill that you might have taught. Dr. Duran, as the daughter of a 3-time school superintendent who went on to be the assistant superintendent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. May we have the next speaker, please?
Next, we have Aaron Asimakopoulos.
This is taken from APS Policy C 2.1. The board directs the superintendent through actions and written policies that prescribe the results the board wants to achieve. The superintendent is accountable for the success of the total organization. The board evaluates the superintendent's performance. The superintendent is accountable to the school board. Policy C 2.7. The superintendent shall be evaluated annually consistent with performance objectives identified by the following 7 standards. Mission, vision, and goals. The superintendent works with the school board to promote students' academic progress. There is currently no plan that successfully promotes student academic progress. Planning and assessment. The superintendent uses a variety of data to guide planning and decision-making that results in student academic progress. There is plenty of data out there that supports an in-person plan that could have resulted in actual academic progress long ago. 3, instructional leadership. The superintendent fosters the success of APS with a focus on continuous improvement, which leads to student success. He has not fostered anything that comes close to student success. 4, organizational leadership. Includes elements of collaborating to promote a positive work climate, implementing systems that support student success, employee satisfaction, and identifying potential operating problems at an early stage. He has failed miserably. 5, community relations. I'm not going to get into this. Community relations are ruined for a long time. 6, professionalism. The one thing he has done well is tell us all to go screw in a very professional manner. 7, student academic success. The superintendent's leadership results in continuous improvement, resulting in measurable student academic success. The only thing that is consistent and measurable in APS is its failure. I again call for the immediate termination of Superintendent Duran and the resignations of O'Grady, Cannonen, and Goldstein. We can do better.
Thank you for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Alexandra Kozel.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you can. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Alexandra Kozel. I'm a teacher at APS. You've heard from me multiple times, so I'm using my voice tonight to share quotes from my colleagues and answering the question, if you could say anything to the school board anonymously, what would it be? Quote, APS shut down for 2 days to supposedly train for concurrent. The only training was from a consultant who didn't even discuss concurrent models. The training provided too much theory and not enough factual information. Quote, I do not feel adequately trained to manage a concurrent classroom while mitigating virus risk. Quote, what is DTL doing to support its teachers across all levels of concurrent hybrid learning in the form of resource distribution? I've been recreating a lot of my own resources for pure virtual instruction and have achieved a rhythm in that regard since the late fall. However, now with a brand new model beginning very soon, how will DTL provide practical resource support for teachers teaching 2 groups of students simultaneously and recreating from scratch again and twice? Quote, DTL sent a super long document where the majority of the info provided was something along the lines of, quote, teachers will create this, teachers will do that, teachers will figure it out. Articles have been sent by DTL to some staff members saying that logging into Teams with multiple devices is recommended, but not all staff have multiple devices. Based on the concurrent models and guidance that have been provided, I don't know how I'm going to meet the service hours and accommodations of my students' IEPs, coordinate pull-out groups for co-teach. I worry that we'll lose so much progress and have another end of year without adequate instruction. Quote, teachers have not been asked what they need for in-person teaching. We have no time to logistically prepare the technology setup of concurrent teaching. Quote, are the school Wi-Fi networks robust enough to handle the demands of concurrent teaching? Teams is already glitching on a regular basis. I realize that's an issue on the Teams server end, but the issue gives me pause when I think about multiple classrooms logging in simultaneously. Quote, we have been told that students in person can't log on to Teams in person. How will they be able to communicate with their virtual peers? Is it separate and unequal? How will we maintain a classroom?
Thank you very much for calling. Please feel free to email us your comments at school.board@apsva.us. Ms. Elliott, next speaker, please.
Next, we have Courtney Schwartz.
Hi, my name is Courtney Schwartz, and I am speaking for the first time tonight on the return to school. I want to start by sincerely thanking Dr. Duran, the board, and the teachers for the upcoming return to school. My son is a kindergartner at Arlington Traditional School, and he is absolutely overjoyed about going into the school in 2 weeks. He is so thrilled to get to experience for the first time the things many of us took for granted pre-COVID. Things like meeting his teacher in person, getting to sit at a desk, getting to ride a bus, getting to go inside the APS building and seeing his peers. While his teacher's hard work and great instructional abilities have allowed my son to have a better remote year than I had dreamed ever possible, I still know that his socio-emotional and educational growth is not what it would have been if he had been in school for the last several months. He often tells us things like, it's hard for me to make friends on my tablet, and I can't wait to get to meet my teacher. As APS moves forward with its return to school in a few weeks, it should also continue to look to the future and begin planning for a 5-days-a-week option for the fall of 2021. APS should start working on identifying what mitigations would be required to give students and families the option to get a full in-person education this fall, and then begin working now to remediate those issues. Our children and families deserve the option to choose whether a traditional 5-days-a-week in-person option is right for them. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Sarah Green.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Duran and school board members. Equity is more than a buzzword. The word equity comes from the Latin word equitas, meaning fairness, equal rights and kindness. Educational equity implies that students may need additional or different resources in order to maintain fairness and access. It means making sure all students have the support they need to be successful. Equity for English language learners means informing their families that they have the right to opt out their students from WEDIT's access testing. Equity is providing transparency to our immigrant families rather than directing schools to use language that cites federal mandates. Equity during a pandemic also means providing all students with 5 to 6 clean air changes, even if their families do not purchase personal air cleaners. It means ensuring they have high-quality masks that will keep them safe indoors, where ventilation and fresh air is not guaranteed. It also includes providing safe lunch spaces outdoors for students whose parents cannot pull them from school each day to ensure their safety. Equity for students also means providing teachers with the resources and training they need to teach. We should have high-quality professional development on the concurrent model before teachers are expected to implement it. Equity requires a transparent process for requesting accommodations that is implemented county-wide, rather than requiring school administrators to make decisions that human resources should make. In conclusion, like all students, English language learners are entitled to and deserve equity in public education. In addition to safe spaces, they need instructional, emotional, psychological, and social scaffolding to be provided by the schools, which allow them fair access to all the opportunities at sound public education.
Please feel free to email us at school.board@apsva.us to share your full comments. Ms. Elliott, next speaker.
All right, this is our final speaker tonight, Lisa Movic.
Yes, I would just like to follow up about our high school students, and I just want to make sure that they will be included in your program. What I found a little bit confusing is saying that hybrid option will not be so great for our students. And I heard that from the teachers for the school board open hours. And I would like to hear more about that plan, because I don't think they should be excluded with the, and it's not only about academics that we talk about. I'm more concerned about their social, emotional skills. And that I would emphasize that it's so important for middle school and high school students. Also, I would like to ask you for the school board open hours if we can ask questions and if our questions can be answered during the school board open hours, not just we say some questions and I don't hear any answers. And also, I would like to emphasize more if we can work with the teachers, and I do respect that we should have a smaller number of students in the classroom, and I'm not sure really why we have these, that our schools are overcrowded. But anyway, I do respect that we are moving forward, reopening schools, and I would emphasize that all children, regardless of age, they deserve to be in school if that is their choice, and emphasize that our special needs students need to receive really more proper education. And I would also mention that I respect that you are opening more government facilities for kindergarten and preschoolers.
Thank you very much for calling in and participating in our citizen comment. If you would like, feel free to email all of your comments to school.board@apsva.us. And we want to thank everyone for participating in tonight's citizen comment. We are now going to have 3 recognitions tonight. First is a special virtual performance of Lift Every Voice and Sing in recognition of Black History Month. And I see Pam Farrell is here to join us to introduce this performance. Hi, Ms. Farrell.
Hi, thank you, Chair O'Grady. Good evening, members of the school board, Dr. Duran, and guests. Tonight we have a special student performance by all of our middle school and high school students in honor of Black History Month. The students will be performing Lift Every Voice. This song was first publicly performed as a poem as part of a celebration of Abraham Lincoln's birthday on February 12, 1900, by 500 school children at the segregated Stanton School in Jacksonville, Florida. Its principal, James Weldon Johnson, wrote the words to introduce its honored guest, Booker T. Washington. The poem was set to music soon after by Johnson's brother in 1905. In 1919, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People dubbed it the Negro National Anthem for its power in voicing the cry for liberation and affirmation for African American people. On September 24, 2016, this song was sung by soprano Denise Graves and chorus at the conclusion of the opening ceremonies for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, at which President Barack Obama delivered his keynote address. We started this tradition in Arlington Public Schools in 2009 in celebration of Black History Month with a single school performance of Lift Every Voice. This year, we wanted to honor all voices and voices being heard and created a performance with all of our middle school and high school choral programs under the direction of our amazing choral teachers. Please welcome APS choral students and please stand for the Black National Anthem.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise.
Erin Ginnerty, Choral Director at Dorothy Ham Middle School.
Jennifer Keller, Choral Director at Gunston Middle School.
Christian Bannock, Choir Director at Thomas Jefferson Middle School.
Andrew Jonas, Choral Director at Kenmore Middle School.
Anna Eckert, Long-Term Choral Substitute at Swanson Middle School.
Josie Walker, Choral Director at Swanson Middle School.
Emily McTavish, Choral Director at Williamsburg Middle School.
Bill Podolsky, Middle and High School Chorus Teacher at HB Woodlawn.
Nadeem Nader, Wakefield High School.
Teresa Severin, Choral Director at Washington Liberty High School.
Jocelyn Mullins, Choral Director at Yorktown High School.
Matthew Rinker, teacher of the music theory courses in digital audio and guitar at Wakefield High School, and music theory and digital audio at Yorktown High School.
Ms. Farrell, that was amazing. Thank you so much to all of the choral directors from our high schools and our middle schools, all of our students who volunteered to participate to honor Black History Month with the singing of Lift Every Voice and Sing. That was very special. I know it takes a lot of work to be able to coordinate digitally a performance like that. And I'm so moved, and I know my colleagues are as well, that we had so many students who wanted to participate in honoring African American and Black history in this way. So we want to thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share the students' work and the teachers.
Absolutely. We do appreciate it. Our next recognition is for Mr. John Chadwick. Today marks John Chadwick's final regular school board meeting as Assistant Superintendent of Facilities and Operations. At the end of the month, he will retire from APS, there he is, and start a new chapter after nearly a decade of dedicated service to our school division. John has worked tirelessly to serve our community and students, leading one of the most important functions within APS, making sure that all of our facilities and buses are safe and efficient, and that we provide well-maintained and thoughtfully designed learning environments for all of our students. I'm going to open with some brief comments in recognition of John's accomplishments, and then I know that Dr. Duran will want to make some comments as well, and then we'll hear from our school board or my school board colleagues as well. John joined our school division in February 2011 as the Director of Design and Construction. In 2013, he was appointed Interim Assistant Superintendent of Facilities and Operations before being named Assistant Superintendent in late 2013. John has a tremendous career. Throughout his time with APS, he has championed optimal learning environments. He understands the importance of integrating well-designed and constructed facilities with teaching and learning, and has been a strong proponent of promoting and incorporating sustainable design practices within our budget framework. John also understands the importance of schools that promote healthy, safe, and supportive learning environments. He is a nationally recognized leader in sustainable schools. In fact, he helped write the book on the subject. Beginning with Discovery Elementary School, John established high standards for integrating exceptional learning environments into sustainable buildings, and he has applied these standards to subsequent projects. Discovery was the first school to receive the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED Zero Energy certification and is one of the largest zero energy buildings of any kind anywhere in the world. It also received zero energy certification by the International Living Future Institute and New Buildings Institute. In 2019, John received the Leadership Award for Outstanding Commitments to Advancing Green Building from the U.S. Green Building Council in recognition of his work in the development of greener schools. While at APS, John has played a major role in initiatives such as capital planning, more seats for more students, the Multimodal Transportation Committee, and various collaborative efforts with county government. He led many new school openings and construction projects that helped address continued growth and made the most efficient use possible of older buildings through new expansion projects. John has presented at nearly every one of our school board meetings through the years, often, and he will acknowledge this, often the last presenter. providing details on complex projects late into the night. Just one sign of his dedication and commitment to this challenging work. Arlington Public Schools is better because of John's leadership and dedication to his trade. On behalf of the school board, we thank you for your service and dedication. We wish you well and all the best in your future endeavors. And now I'd like to offer the opportunity for Dr. Duran to say a few words. Dr. Duran.
Thank you, Chair O'Grady, and thank you, John, for your service to APS, and certainly congratulations on all that you've accomplished. And certainly I've had a shorter time to work with you in my tenure here, but I want to echo what Chair O'Grady's acknowledgement was of your career and your achievements. And beyond your career and achievements, you've been a strong leader and a colleague and a supervisor to many of your staff. And so I want to share a few comments that some of your staff have shared about you that I would like to share publicly. So one said, quote, John has always shown a personal interest in his leadership team and all members of the facilities and operations staff. Even though John always made sure deadlines are met and the work is accomplished, he understood how important family is to each of us, and he often asked about our families by their names. Another staff member said, quote, facilities and operations encompasses a wide range of services, and there is a steep learning curve outside of one's area of expertise. Yet John spent the time to learn and ask questions, showing interest in all of the offices. And he also took the time to talk to staff members individually, regardless of their position or person, as he left for the day. And so, John, those are just two comments I think that stand out for the kind of leader you've been. Keeping an open mind and your willingness to learn from your team and support them in areas that maybe you even weren't familiar with at first, and helping them to be an advocate for their growth and helping others on their team be able to see the bigger picture of how facilities and operations really fits into the school system. So colleagues of yours have also noted that that while John may not always agree with you, he's willing to give you the room to speak your mind and show that he supports you and values your opinion. That's certainly been my experience as well, John, working with you in this short time. You're willing to try new approaches to old problems, asking good questions to help strengthen the approach forward. I've certainly come to appreciate, as many of your colleagues and staff have, your sense of humor and your willingness to really dig into difficult decisions and honestly talk about those issues in a way that helps us get better and strengthens our work. Clearly, during the pandemic, you and your team have had to play a crucial role in our facilities and preparing them to open safely. And so thank you for that, whether it was facilities or our transportation as well that you've been really working hard on. And I think your legacy within APS will live on long after your retirement in the many projects which Chair O'Grady just talked about, and the imprint on the community that you have in the wonderful schools that you've designed and helped that will exist for generations to come. So John, on behalf of the executive leadership team and your staff, I want to thank you for everything that you've done for APS. And we'll make sure to still call you at 4 a.m. every once in a while when you want to be part of the weather calls, or maybe we'll make sure and answer the call when we do to help us out with our decisions. So John, best of luck in retirement to you.
Dr. Duran, was that a retirement gift? Okay, I'd like to go to Ms. Diaz-Torres in case she has some comments that she would like to make.
I do. John, we've only briefly worked together, but I want to echo everything that has already been said. Thanking you for your service. When I think about learning experiences and about the environments that we want our students to thrive in, so much of that begins with the school. And over the past 10 years, you've really helped us raise the bar in our facilities, and particularly during a time when we were growing so dramatically. I think that you've done so much to help improve the sustainability of our buildings and have really been a field leader, and we're really grateful for that. And Arlingtonians, if there's any doubt about your impact here, all that Arlingtonians need to do is drive down the street and we'll see one of the many schools that you've contributed to our community to see your legacy. So thank you so much and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Diaz-Torres. Mr. Pretty.
Yes, thank you. John, thank you very much. As Chair O'Grady said in the summary, you've left a legacy of net zero buildings with Discovery, and I followed the construction of Fleet as a member of the public and a parent, and I hope we can continue that innovative thought so we can continue down that path of sustainability that you have paved. So thank you. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Mr. Goldstein.
Hi, yes, thank you. Hi, John. So for everyone's, edification here, in the last dozen years, APS has undergone relentless enrollment growth. And John has led facilities and operations through most of those years as we've expanded by over 6,000 seats. But construction and seat expansion is not the only ramification of rapid enrollment growth. In addition to construction, there's transportation, maintenance, custodial services, stormwater issues, relocatables, power needs, sustainability, et cetera, that are all impacted by enrollment growth and all falling into John's department. So I want to acknowledge how enormous the scope of John's work is, and made even more enormous by the decade of rapid enrollment growth. So I want to join my colleagues in thanking you for carrying such an important part of addressing decades worth of enrollment growth, and wish you all the best in your retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Now I'd like to turn our Vice Chair, Dr. Cannon. And Dr. Cannon.
Yes, thank you. So let me first say I had the chance to join the Facilities Advisory Commission earlier this month in their celebration of John. And there was real sadness as well as, of course, appreciation for all of John's work with that group. And then I just, on a personal note, just want to say, John, I've enjoyed working with you so much. And I appreciate and admire your passion and commitment to great architecture, to sustainability, and the health and well-being of our students. I'm truly going to miss working. I'm sure that we'll see each other again, and look forward to that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. And as a token of appreciation for Mr. Chadwick's service of 10 years to our school community, the school board has presented him a small gift that I think will serve his other passion, which is gardening. And I know that he loves gardening because in my daytime job, I work in a building, usually when we're working in a building, where many of us can marvel at John's, at his patio. And on his patio, he has an incredible array of beautiful plants. And so we have gifted him a gift to help him with his gardening work and his other passion. And we do so much appreciate you, John, all of the work that you've done and the legacy you leave in our beautiful buildings, and all the dedication that you've shown to APS. I have enjoyed working with you for years before I was on the school board, and I've appreciated working with you to grow some of our buildings in our county and to plan as well. I know you probably will always take our call, as Dr. Duran mentioned. We may call you at 4 in the morning, but that may be one of the things you least miss. But I hope that you will always know that the buildings that you've prepared for our students will live on and serve them for quite a long time. With that, I'd like to give you the opportunity to make a few comments.
Well, thank you. Give me 1 minute to get myself together here. So I do have a few comments, and while I'm finding them on my computer, I want to thank you very much for the gift. It's very well chosen, and it's almost pruning season.
Excellent.
So, this afternoon, I did estimate the number of school board meetings I'd attended over the last 10 years, and it's somewhere around 200. They used to start at 7:30, then it went to 6:30, and then it went to 7. But they've ended anywhere from 9:30 p.m. to recently 1:30 a.m. As Dr. Murphy wrote, instruction is top dog. And as we well know, instruction leads construction. So facilities and operations, as you noted just now, Ms. O'Grady, the items we present are almost invariably come at the end of the agenda. We started out in that old boardroom at the Ed Center. Remember the awful pause while ELT members struggled to close the folding partition after a reception. And remember the old offices and conference room. How did you manage in so little space? I don't know how you did it. Then we moved to the new SciFX, and then who would have thought this even a year ago, we moved to virtual meetings, then to hybrid meetings, and tonight back to virtual again because of the weather. I've attended many work sessions and quite a few committees of the whole, not to mention all those weekly meetings. We spent a lot of time together, and of course, there have been changes among you board members. I have learned so much from the board members and from your predecessors. I can't begin to thank you and tell you how much I appreciate the focus you all have on what is best for the children of Arlington. And also for your strong support of facilities and operations, which is not always the case in other school divisions and among my colleagues there. Most of all, I've learned that when we make the best decisions and we move the division forward best when we work collaboratively and when we involve all key stakeholders in the process. I've also learned more than I ever knew I wanted to know about community engagement in Arlington. When the engagement reaches a crescendo and seems overwhelming, as occasionally it does for all of us, I've learned to remind myself and the facilities and operations team that the most positive endorsement of our work from our community is the school bond vote, which has hovered around 80% for the last 10 years. That doesn't happen in very many other communities and is a real testament, I think, to what we all do. When I came to APS 10 years ago, I wanted to find out where school buildings came from, how the decisions were made to build them, and what would be built and when. I also wanted to understand how they are operated and maintained over time, and how that too should influence what we design and how we build it. I wanted to learn about school buildings from inception through the end of their use, and sometimes, as we see with the Ed Center, different use. So tremendous credit is due to plant operations for their great cleaning standards, the green cleaning procedures, and integrated pest management, which is something I never thought about before. And to maintenance services for their diligent maintenance and their insistence that design and construction specify HVAC systems to be as simple to operate and maintain as possible. Well, I sure came to the right place. In 10 years, thanks to design and construction, we've consolidated our central office at SciFX, which has made a huge difference to our operations. And we built all those schools and additions and renovations that you listed, Ms. O'Grady. I had no idea how difficult it would be to do this in Arlington, or that projects would go over those 10 years from 3 years to 5 years from adoption in the CIP to opening the doors to the students. We've tried really hard to create schools that kids can't wait to get to in the morning and don't want to leave after school. We've done our best to integrate teaching, learning, architecture, sustainability, and environmental responsibility, and I really appreciate that is understood widely in the community. With our zero energy high performance schools and solar power purchase agreements, we're a leader among school divisions that are really addressing climate change. In 10 years, Aquatic Services has successfully opened and operated 3 new pools and completely reinvented operations during COVID. Boy, have I learned a lot about pool operations and pool patrons, more than I ever expected to know. I tried to remember how many buses we had 10 years ago. Maybe it was 150, but now it's 200. We've implemented routing software, then we upgraded it, and now we are working with a consultant to completely reinvent routing with only 11 students on a bus under COVID. I'm very hopeful that this consultant will help us route our students much more efficiently when we finally return to full bus occupancy. It's been an honor to serve on ELT. I've learned so much about how a school division operates, how important decisions are made, considering the different perspectives that we all bring. I do have to confess that I've learned more about how APS operates in the last 12 months during COVID than in the 9 previous years put together, and how hard change and uncertainty has been on all of us. I have to say and acknowledge how hard the last year has been for everybody, how much we've had to change, how it seems we're constantly planning and unplanning, going around in circles rather than moving ahead, and having to rethink the most minute details. Personally, I'm devastated to see classrooms with kids sitting 6 feet apart, facing the teacher on the learning wall, when we have all been working so hard for the last 40 years to change that. It's a constant struggle and we're all exhausted. I know we are all doing the very, very best we can. There will be a new normal. We're learning a lot that is positive from this experience, and the kids will survive and they will thrive. So to end, there is one thing that I am really looking forward to after APS, and that is being able to enjoy snow. Thank you, thank you, thank you, all of you. It's been an amazing 10 years. I'm going to miss everybody. Thank you.
We will miss you, Conchas. Thank you again so much. We appreciate your service, and just can't wait to see what you do next. With that, I'd like to now invite Emily Vincent, president of the Arlington CCPTA, to make some comments and present our last recognition tonight. Emily.
Thank you, Chair O'Grady. Good evening. On behalf of the Executive Board of the Arlington County Council of PTAs, I want to express our deep appreciation to the members of the Arlington School Board for their commitment and hard work on behalf of the county's students, staff, and families. Over the past year, the school board has worked carefully and patiently with APS staff, families, public health officials, and the Arlington County Board to address the exceptional challenges brought about by a global pandemic. You have been in uncharted territory as you have worked to determine when and how to reopen schools, how to ensure equitable access and opportunity via remote learning, how to support the physical and mental well-being of staff and students, and how to close the budget gaps that have resulted from COVID-19. We want you to know that we see and appreciate the incredible amount of effort that has gone into navigating all of these challenges. Additionally, we want to thank the school board for its willingness to engage the CCPTA as a thought partner and collaborator. We appreciate your participation in our membership meetings and your responsiveness to our questions, concerns, and ideas. We may not always agree with each other, but we believe our work is strengthened through respectful engagement and the open exchange of ideas and perspectives. Thank you for all you do, and we look forward to working together in 2021 to advance equity, inclusion, student health and well-being, and success. Thank you.
And thank you, Emily. We definitely and greatly appreciate our partnership with the CCPTA and the involvement of all of our parents and parent leaders. Thank you so much. We are now at announcements. Monday, February 22nd, there will be a virtual school board policy subcommittee meeting at 2 p.m. On Thursday, February 25th, we will have a virtual school board meeting for the presentation of the superintendent's proposed FY 2022 budget at 7 p.m. Immediately following that presentation, we will hold budget work session number 1. Now, I'd like to invite my board colleagues to let us know if they have any announcements. And for that, I'd like to start with Mr. Goldstein. Mr. Goldstein, do you have any announcements this evening?
Well, I do indeed. Thank you. And I have some announcements from some of my liaison schools. At Ashlawn last week, they had their Share the Love food drive, and families donated over 1,000 food items to that were donated to AFAC in support of the community. At Long Branch, they have continued to hold their monthly Reach for Reading events virtually and have had a great turnout. This week's session will focus on supporting minority language families with parent and teacher conferences and returning to the school building. Reach for Reading is a family literacy program at Long Branch designed for English learner students and their families from preschool to grade 2. Monthly meetings are held in the evening. Each meeting is focused on a curriculum area and includes reading, writing, and math. Representatives from Arlington County programs such as the Public Library, the Nature Centers, and the Arlington Soccer Association attend to register children and parents for various programs. The Reach for Reading program provides the opportunity for parents to embrace their role as academic coaches and allow their children to reach their fullest social and academic potential. At Arlington Science Focus School, they held their annual STEM night virtually last night, which I was fortunate enough to attend, albeit virtually. STEM activities included drop-in sessions on making a copper tape flashlight, underwater fireworks, a flashlight that projects constellations, coding, recycled ocean sculptures, and more. And in addition, they had live events on astronomy, reptiles and amphibians, a space shuttle simulation, robotics demonstrations, guest speakers on STEM careers, and the Mars rover Perseverance, which, by the way, landed safely on Mars about 4 hours ago after a 7-month and 293 million mile journey from Earth. And finally, at Barrett Elementary School, their kindergarten through 5th grade students are participating in Discovery Lab Mondays, which is an asynchronous program highlighting current NASA accomplishments, STEAM challenges, and kid-friendly surveys and polls. Live sessions during the week have featured interactive lessons with the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, and the Space Telescope Science Institute. And today, Thursday, February 18th, the Perseverance rover that just landed on Mars has Barrett Elementary School's name aboard, along with a winning essay from one of their students. So those are the announcements for my liaison schools today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Ms. Diaz-Torres.
I do not have any new announcements for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pretty.
I don't have any announcements for this meeting either.
Mr. Pretty. And then I turn to our Vice Chair, Dr. Cannon. And Dr. Cannon, do you have any announcements this evening?
No announcements. Thank you, Mr. Grady.
Thank you. Then I do have a few announcements I'd like to make this evening. First, I'd like to provide an update on plans to return to in-person school board meetings. We are excited that students will be returning to the classrooms in the next few weeks. In alignment with the students' return, the board is planning to return to in-person meetings starting with our March 11th meeting. We will begin with in-person board meetings only. Work sessions and other meetings will continue to be held virtually for the time being. In order to meet safely, we will need to comply with all health and safety guidelines. This includes wearing masks at all times and maintaining 6 feet of physical distance, as well as using hand sanitizers and wipes to clean all surfaces. The capacity of the boardroom has been measured for social distancing and will allow for approximately 15 attendees in addition to the board and staff. We will continue to hear all citizen comment at the beginning of the in-person board meetings and limit the comment period to 1 hour. For our in-person meetings, we will offer speakers the option to call in or to sign up to speak in person. Based on room capacity, we can only allow up to 15 in-person speakers, with the remaining 15 slots available to call-in speakers. If fewer than 15 sign up to speak in person, we will allow additional call-in speakers to fill any empty slots. We will continue to use the lottery process if we receive more than 30 speaker requests. Depending on room capacity and attendance, in-person speakers may be asked to leave the boardroom after their comments so we can allow others to participate. We will continue to refine our plans going forward to allow as much public participation in our meetings as possible, and we appreciate your patience as we work out the details. We will share updates on a regular basis. Now I'd like to provide an update on communications. Since our last school board meeting, we have received messages on the phased return to hybrid in-person learning plan. The board members and superintendent receive all emails and receive a weekly report of messages received for consideration. Please send questions on the reopening of schools to engage@apsva.us or submit them via the online form. Due to the volume of messages we receive, it may take staff some time to provide replies. We appreciate the community's patience. Updates on the reopening of schools are shared by Dr. Duran via School Talk every Tuesday at each board meeting, also under the monitoring item as well. Finally, school board members continue to host weekly virtual open office hours. Currently, open office hours is being held as a forum so board members can listen to comments and concerns from as many community members as time allows. Following each open office hours, the board members share what they've heard with their colleagues and the superintendent. To participate in open office hours, please sign up with the Sign Up Genius link that is shared via School Talk and posted on the APS homepage on Friday afternoons. Mr. Goldstein will be holding our next open office hours on Monday, February 22nd from 6:30 until 8:30 p.m. We appreciate the community's ongoing engagement, especially during these unprecedented times. Dr. Duran, do you have any announcements this evening?
Yes, I do, Chair O'Grady. And someone can please bring up the announcements for me. Appreciate that. And as I start this evening, before I jump into the announcements I do want to acknowledge our first real snow day, which occurred today, and add some clarity about that decision and how that changed overnight even. So the decision to close fully, which was including virtual and in-person classes, was based on several factors. The first one being the federal government and several neighboring school divisions, including Fairfax and Loudoun, announcing a full closure status based on the forecast. And with many of our teachers living and having students in school in those areas, we have to consider those decisions and their impact on our teachers and staff and our ability to provide distance learning. Second, and very importantly as well, is that the forecast was uncertain with icy conditions and significant freezing rain and sleet that was predicted. And so that also increased the possibility of power outages and connectivity disruptions. And so that would have limited our ability, obviously, to deliver consistent, equitable access to our distance learning. And so that was really important for us to make that decision and change. With previous snow events this year and even for tomorrow, which we have potential ice, we have been able to maintain distance learning for all students, and we're going to continue to adhere to that when possible. And so we make the best decisions with the information we have at the time that we have it. It may change from the evening to the morning, and I certainly understand how challenging snow decisions are for parents and staff, and even in a normal year. So our process is really to provide an update the evening before, right after around 5 p.m. If any changes need to be made, we would announce again the following morning very early, which we did this morning. And I want to reiterate how hard, that those decisions are, but we want to make sure that we keep people safe and that we have the ability through any power disruptions to remotely or in person provide that learning. If I can have the next slide, please. Pre-registration for our APS pre-K programs is currently underway, and our Office of Early Childhood and Elementary Education is hosting information nights to share information with families about our pre-K programs. And you can see our pre-K information night, which was held last night, and the recording of the event is available online for families to review. The information was shared about the Virginia Preschool Initiative and the community peer pre-K programs. And next week on February 24th, Wednesday at 7 p.m., we will host Montessori Information Night to share information about the primary and elementary Montessori programs that we have. So we're asking everyone to please spread the word about this to families who may have a pre-K aged child or someone that they know to apply for these programs. Pre-K does prepare our youngest learners for kindergarten and ensure that they are enrolled in a high quality program to get them on track for success. And so make sure if you know anyone that you let them know. And if you're aware that some families are experiencing financial difficulty, we know that due to the pandemic, those families may have a reduced income and they may qualify for reduced fees for these programs based on that. So they may not have been eligible previously, but now based on the pandemic, they can be, that change in their income would apply. So we have more information that you can see on our website and the link here. Next slide, please. We're getting pretty close to the start of our annual budget deliberations, although we talk about the current budget in my monitoring report. This is the fiscal year 22 budget that's coming up. A couple of important dates to keep in mind. On the 25th, next week, I'll be proposing the budget for the fiscal year 22. And also that date kicks off the first work session, and we have posted a full schedule of all the work sessions that you can see here. March 23rd will be a public hearing on the proposed budget, and we invite our community members to be involved and to come share your thoughts on that. You can also see many other dates listed on the slide in the months to come. A lot of work on the budget is already underway, and the full list of meeting dates and the work sessions and are posted on our website and the topics for those. So Please follow along. The meetings will be live streamed. As Chair O'Grady said, the work sessions are still virtual, but they will be live streamed. And we encourage you to weigh in, send your questions to us using the form on the Engage page section of our website. Next slide, please. In addition to the budget calendar, a few additional always in my announcements like to share our school board action plan and where we are with progress with that. Next slide, please. The visioning process for the pre-K adult instructional programs and pathways, also known as the IPP, has had several community engagement activities thus far, with 3 virtual meetings held to date. One was for PTA leaders, APS school ambassadors, and representatives from our advisory groups. And then 2 sessions were open to all community members. And next week, families can bring any questions that they have about the IPP to one of the virtual open office hours, which staff will hold on February 22nd and the 24th, again next week. And in addition to that, we have a community questionnaire that's open through February 28th for anyone who would like to share input in this process. This is available on the Engage IPP webpage, and it's available in English, Spanish, Arabic, Amharic, and Mongolian. So please share with us your thoughts as we're working through the instructional program and pathways. Next slide, please. And this is the last announcement with regards to our school board action plan. We have 3 school naming and renaming processes that are underway, and tonight you're going to be hearing an information item on the first one. And this will be for the proposed name for the new neighborhood elementary school, which will open at the Key site this fall. The board will take action on that proposed name at the March 11th board meeting. The naming process for the new school facility at the Reed site, which will be home to most of the McKinley students in the fall, that is also underway, and we should hear more about that process next month. The naming process for the Key Immersion program will begin in the spring to determine if they'd like to maintain the Key Immersion name or explore a new one. For our policies that are currently under review, we have one tonight as an information item, and that's around real property. And another policy is currently open for public comment through March 2nd, and that is staff electronic technologies acceptable use. So if you're interested in that, please provide us comment that is available through March 2nd. All this information can be found about the naming process or the policy reviews at our Engage website. Chair O'Grady, that concludes all my announcements. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. We do appreciate that. And I'd like to ask my colleagues if they have any questions or comments regarding your announcements. We'll start with Ms. Diaz-Torres. Ms. Diaz-Torres?
Thank you for the thorough announcements. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Mr. Pretty.
I don't have any questions. I just want to reiterate what Dr. Duran said, and please fill out the survey for the IPP so that we can get as much feedback as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Pretty. Then to Mr. Goldstein.
I also do not have questions or comments for Dr. Duran at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to turn to our Vice Chair, Dr. Cannon. And Dr. Cannon.
I'm going to play the broken record and share that I have no questions.
All right, no worries there. I would like to also reiterate what Mr. Pretty said, which is the instructional program pathways is an important opportunity for us to create and look at the vision for our school system for the future. And it is important that our community be able to weigh in and give their advice and their thoughts about the future of our system. So I hope that they will engage on that particular issue then. And with that, Dr. Duran, we want to thank you for your announcement. We are now at consent. May I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I move we adopt the consent agenda.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dr. Cannon. And is there a second?
Second.
The clerk will call the roll then.
All in favor of the motion, please say yes. Those opposed say no. Ms. Diaz-Torres?
Yes.
Mr. Goldstein?
Yes.
Mr. Pretty?
Yes.
Dr. Cannon?
Yes.
Ms. O'Grady?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. I would like to announce that under consent, the board received 2 briefing reports that are accessible to the public on board docs. First, the World Languages Brief provides a description of the program, which offers students a variety of opportunities to learn another language, preparing them to participate more fully in a global community. It also includes data from the recently completed program evaluation. The report highlights the work of the World Languages Office to provide a robust program of high quality instruction and a rigorous curriculum that meets the needs of every student. The report also provides data on secondary language offerings, proficiency, participation in advanced studies, and classroom observations. Programs such as Spanish for fluent speakers and dual language immersion are also highlighted. We encourage you to review this briefing report to learn more about world languages and APS. The board also received the annual policy review briefing report, which summarizes the work of the staff-based policy review team and the school board policy subcommittee. These groups collaborate to review all policies regularly and revise them as needed, ensuring they comply with state code, as well as meet the needs of our school community. They also manage the process for drafting new policies when needed. As described in the brief, the policy review process also solicits internal and external stakeholder feedback and allows the board to provide recommendations on current policies and on revisions. Finally, the brief provides information on the status of the policy review schedule and plans for moving forward with this work. Under consent, the board also approved a staff proposal for submission to the Virginia Department of Education for APS to implement a pilot for a local diagnostic assessment for grades K through 2 and as an alternative to PALS. This assessment will be used to identify students at risk of not meeting grade level expectations in reading. Finally, I am very pleased to announce that under consent, the board appointed Ms. Kathy Lynn as the interim assistant superintendent of facilities and operations. Ms. Lynn has 20 years of experience in project management, and she was the APS energy manager and stormwater program administrator for 9 years. During that time, she managed the energy portfolio and oversaw compliance with stormwater requirements. A strong champion of clean energy, she has worked collaboratively with students, parents, school and county staff, and the greater community to support sustainability, education, and environmental stewardship. In August 2020, Ms. Lynn was appointed Director of Facilities and Operations, taking on significant administrative tasks in directing, planning, and supervising critical functions of the Facilities and Operations Department. We thank Ms. Lynn for stepping up to take on this challenge and look forward to working with her as the Interim Assistant Superintendent for Facilities and Operations. Congratulations, Ms. Lynn.
Thank you, Chair O'Grady. I want to thank the members of the school board and Dr. Duran for this opportunity to work with our team and continue the good work that Mr. Chadwick has done in his last 10 years. We know there's a lot of work ahead of us, and I think our team understands that, and we will continue working hard to make it a successful return to school for everyone.
I want to thank you as well, Ms. Lynn, for stepping in at this a very important time as we're moving towards in-person learning for students, and I know that you will help us through that, and I really appreciate that as we're in the process of the interview process of selecting someone, that you will also be there to help that individual when they come on board, because coming in new will be very difficult for anyone to the position, coming in new to the position. And so I thank you for stepping up and being there for our community.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Lynn. We look forward to working with you in your new expanded role. We appreciate your service. We are now at the monitoring item section of the agenda. Our one monitoring item is the school year 2020-2021 update. We use this time at each meeting to review with the superintendent the current educational delivery model, as well as the intentional steps we are taking to safely return to in-person learning. Dr. Duran.
Thank you, Chair O'Grady, and if we could please bring up the PowerPoint. Thank you. So as I begin tonight, clearly a big focus is since our last board meeting has been the additional dates and movement forward about bringing students and staff back in a hybrid model next month in March. This has been a long process of planning and preparation by many departments and employees that I can't thank enough if I started naming people. So many people have been involved in this, with all of our planning focused on how do we best prepare for instruction, health and safety of everyone, and regardless of the model, because we will have both models in place so students can continue to learn and grow and have access to a quality education. And so Tonight, I'm going to review a little bit about the transition to the hybrid in-person instruction plan that I announced last week, walk through some of the latest health and safety metrics, some of the operational steps with regards to meals and air quality and transportation, and of course conclude with some information about the financial outlook that we are right now. Next slide, please. Our decisions about returning students to the building and the prioritization of which student cohorts those would be have been really informed by the VDH and Virginia Department of Health and the guidance that we received about reopening. But another key component is really thinking about the foundation. I've shown this several times. I think it's important to remember that we have to consider the full spectrum of everything. This really involves looking at holistically the implementation of mitigation strategies, our readiness and our capacity at the building level to do that, any indication of virus spread among those reporting in person, and all those factors in combination with the health metrics we're seeing in our community, which I'll review in the next few slides, are really the foundation to look at when we consider how we can best move forward with any in-person opportunities. And we've had some in-person opportunities since last November, so growing those opportunities for more students. I have received many questions about why we're not waiting until April, or can we wait till all staff have received all of their vaccines 100%? And certainly I am encouraged by the progress with the vaccine program and what we're seeing there and the importance of what needs to happen with regards to our vaccines. But this is clearly not what we've heard from the guidance and even from CDC, from VDH, not a prerequisite for opening schools, but we are certainly going to make sure we do everything we can to make sure our staff get access to vaccines that want them. And so very thankful to the partnership with the county. Governor Northam actually came this week to see the partnership that was happening with our school division in the county, and I want to thank that. I also want to note that we've been patient and taken our time to really be safe about when we're ready to do that. We know that many families have been desperately wanting their students back in classroom to learn, and we know many staff have also wanted to be back, but we needed to take the time to make sure we're implementing all the mitigation strategies that are recommended, and those recommendations evolve, and we did receive, even recently, CDC has new recommendations. So we've got to continually follow those and making sure any adjustments that are needed to those mitigation strategies we put in place. Transitions are difficult and change is always difficult. And so hopefully we're working to continuously communicate, and we'll continue to do that over the next several months, how we can put these measures in place, what we're doing, and how do we ensure everyone is safe and students and staff are able to thrive successfully in learning. Next slide, please. Just a review of the VDH decision matrix for prioritizing students. I've shared this before, but you can see clearly that yes, we are in the highest level of community transmission, but that has been expanded to show that it is opportunities for us to have more learners as we have better mitigation in place. And so we continue to see COVID-19 here in our county as the highest risk, but we also are seeing success with mitigation and putting things in place for us to be able to understand any early warning signs of transmission in schools so that if we have to adjust things. But it's really important that we note that we have to begin to think about those priority learners first, which is what the first group. And then as you can see, other groups of students that can be brought back in a hybrid way through those mitigation strategies when we feel that we have some in place to do so. And that's why we've taken some time to do that, but we're now at a place where we believe we're able to move to that next level. Next slide, please. The data presented here on this slide I've shown many times, but this shows our metrics as of last Friday, the 12th. And you can see that the dashboard, we update it every Friday. This one currently directly aligns with CDC and VDH guidance, but CDC did have some new guidance that came out on how they would measure these indicators. So you might see this change based on the latest CDC change. But right now what it is we look at our transmission risk per CDC, the 14-day case incidence rate, and the percentage of test positives over time of those 14 days. We've seen a slight decrease in that total number of new cases per 100,000 since last week even, but we do remain in the high risk category. And there's also a link here if individuals are wanting to go deeper into our operational metrics. There's no substantial changes in what I've been presenting there, so we do have the link there. But at this point, we are moving forward with confidence on the mitigation measures, and our ability to implement them, and is really important. And one of the callers said 100% of the time, absolutely. We need to make sure that that is the key foundation to what any of the guidance says. And if you looked at the last slide when I was talking about the level of school ability to implement mitigation, that is with 100% people following what the expectations are. So with that in place, with the resources we put in place, with the planning we've done over several months, we do believe this is a time that we can, on the next slide, begin to move to return our students in place. Next slide. So here we know that level 1 students, students have been receiving in-person learning support, and that was really about accessing distance learning support, and they've been doing that since November 4th. As more students return beginning in March, we have this timeline here on our website so families can see and understand what that would look like. I want to clarify also, we've had some other in-person learning support available, like our workspace and instructional learning support programs. But as we phase in, those will change. And our secondary workspace program that's offered at our high schools will end on February 26th. And for our instructional learning support program, that will we're going to only be able to offer that on Mondays, but we are looking at how we may be able to provide some other opportunities for Tuesday through Friday for those students when they're not in their hybrid. We're working with the county on that, so I'll hopefully have more information on that. But currently, that the week of February 22nd, that will only be available then on Mondays, while those students then would be in their hybrid on the other 2 days. Level 2, which you can see here, which is our career and technical ed, that started at the Career Center on February 3rd. And so really what's new and what we're talking about is now our next phases, where students in hybrid instruction models, the families who selected that, will be attending 2 days per week, some on Tuesday, Wednesday, or the others on Thursday, Friday. The week of March 2nd, we will start with all pre-K to second grade students. And we will start with all students who are enrolled in countywide elementary special ed programs. And those students that are in countywide elementary special ed programs will be 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday. Then the following week on March 9th will be our 3rd through 5th grade students and our 6th through 9th grade students that week, who will be the first time for those students to be in their school building, having transitioned from another level. They will have not been in their school. So that's why we're starting with them first at the secondary. And that same week, we will also include all of the countywide secondary special ed programs, 6th through 12th, and those would be also 4 days a week for that group. The others, as I mentioned, are the hybrid 2 days a week. So our countywide special ed program students will be 4 days a week, and our other students will be 2 days a week in the Tuesday, Wednesday, or the Thursday, Friday schedule. And then the final transition will be the week of March 16th, our 7th and 8th grade students at the middle school, and our 10th through 12th grade at the high school. Next slide, please. We've also been carefully monitoring our exclusions for any early indicators of disease transmission in our schools. On Friday, February 12th, we updated the COVID-19 dashboard for us with data showing the total exclusions among staff and students who've been reporting in person to date since November 1st. And exclusions that are there include positive COVID cases as well as close contacts. Of the 1,311 employees reporting in person, we've received 2 reports of positive cases the week of February 6th and 81 to date since November 1st. Among the 320 students and the 850 athletes, there have been 5 reported positives in the past week and 27 since November 1st. And you can see there are a greater number of close contacts reported for each group. And this is encouraging data because this shows that the mitigation is working in level 1. Again, as we move forward to having more of our students and staff in person, we will then be able to have the breakdown of data at the building level. But currently with the small number, this is at the division level. But once we do start in March, moving those larger groups in, we will have that breakdown by building level on a weekly basis to see. Next slide, please. We're also excited to launch our new screening process with our employees, and that's begun. And now we're going to expand that to our students as we welcome our students back into our buildings. So beginning on March 1st, All parents and legal guardians will receive one invitation for each student via email or text if you have a cell phone that receives text, and those would have to be the numbers that are listed in our Parent View or Synergy account, and you will get that starting on March 1st every day at 5:30 a.m. regardless of the instructional pathway of distance or hybrid. And this screener is available in multiple languages. It is expected that each student has completed their symptom screener prior to arriving at the bus stop or the start of the day for the school day to ensure that we are measuring the effectiveness of our mitigation and have that data. Parents and guardians would be able to show a date and timestamp verification screen that the student's cleared to attend that day, and invitations will be sent every day of the week, even on the weekends, because the system does not allow us to differentiate which students might be participating in some weekend activities. But obviously, if your child is not participating on the weekend, you would need to complete it on that day. But we do want you to complete it every day that your child is, virtual or distance during the week. Students who do not pass their screener are going to receive an automatic email reply from the system with their exclusion from attending in-person activities and instruction until the conditions are satisfied. These letters are also being sent in multiple languages. Now, this is a lot of new information, I know. So we're going to be providing more of this next Tuesday, and we're going to also have a short tutorial video for what this looks like for parents. And parents and legal guardians, I encourage all of you to check your Parent View account to ensure that if you want to receive text message, that's available in the system. And also, if you don't know, you can contact your school if you need assistance on how to update that. Next slide, please. Feedback from our staff is also very important, and we know that there's been a lot of questions that we're receiving from staff, and so we need to continue to get feedback. We need to continue to gain more insight from what is needed to support staff. One thing we did, next slide, is to have a staff feedback that was sent, those that reported in the hybrid model during the week of January 25th and February 2nd. We did send out an all-staff survey to gather information on the input that they saw about preparation and experience that they saw in those few days. This survey was open for 1 week, February 8th to 15th. Next slide, please. Nearly 3,000 staff responded, and the majority of those were teachers and assistants, as noted on the slide you can see. That nearly 2,000 staff who responded had not reported in person or had only reported for the 2 designated weeks that we had them coming in person. And the remainder had been reporting, though, on a consistent basis several days a week. And when we asked them about the knowledge of mitigation strategies and health and safety procedures, 53% understood or knew what steps they needed to follow. 25% were neutral, neither strongly agree or disagree, and 23% were not aware. So these results are, without staff names, will be sending reports to schools to look at and see their percentage so that they can work on making sure that we are providing that clarity and that knowledge. And that is also why staff members are coming back prior to those dates. When students come, they will be coming prior to continue to look at this. Nearly half reported that the mitigation measures are consistently adhered to when we asked that question. 26% indicated that there are no gaps in adherence, and the remainder were neutral, likely because they've not been in person consistently or they didn't have enough information to answer. We also asked staff we know that all of the mitigation measures are important and all of them are things that we're working towards planning, but we did ask them to rank which ones they felt at this time are most important for us to consider. And you can see there that vaccination was number 1, universal mask usage, distancing was 3rd, and air quality. But this is not to say that none of these are, I assume if staff members probably could have said that all of these are important, but this is just one way in terms of ranking for us to see. Next slide, please. Here you see 2 charts that highlight feedback regarding how staff felt in terms of their readiness to teach in their model. And one key gap here identified was teachers' preparation to teach in person in the concurrent model and their understanding and familiarity with the technology that was needed for that. And so we still need to make sure, and we even heard some of our callers, speakers tonight, talk about the need for more clarity and help and support. Yes, we did provide professional development by Dr. Caitlin Tucker, which focused on blended learning to design and facilitate concurrent learning in the classroom. We do have a self-paced lessons that staff can enroll in related to that, and other Microsoft Teams to support them in the concurrent model, and sessions on monitoring. And there are those resources that we put there. We know that that's not enough. We know we need to continue to support staff in that. And so we are working on that. And I know Ms. Loft sent out an email to staff recently with some of the information, and we'll continue to work closely with our principals and our DTL and IS staff to see how we can continue to support them. Another area that was a big question was technologies that were needed to support them in the concurrent model. And we did share with them and identify what those would be. A voice amplifier, which will allow students participating in distance learning and in person to hear the teacher's voice more clearly. Some wired headphones with a microphone that will allow teachers to hear students participating via distance learning and communicate directly with them. And a USB webcam with a built-in microphone that can be a document camera to facilitate sharing information more easily with students who are participating in person and those via distance learning. And then a gooseneck webcam stand with a clip on it and a 10-foot USB extension cord to connect that to the teacher's laptop. So a couple of important things that are needed, but we do know that we saw from the survey and what we've been hearing is that this is an area we need to continue to make sure over the next couple of weeks that we have before we return to this in person, that we will support our teachers in a way. A key takeaway in response to the feedback was that teachers regarding how to use the equipment, that's a concern. How do they use it? How to set it up? How do they maximize the use of this technologies? And so we will have videos shared with staff next week when they're returning to in person to begin to set up in preparation for their 3rd and 5th graders and for our 6th and 9th grade students who are coming back on March 9th. We're working on some resources, some videos, and some other opportunities that I know that we'll be sharing later. Next slide, please. So a lot of questions continue always around our operational preparation, and that's key in our ability to mitigate. And so I want to share a couple of highlights on that. Next slide, please. With regards to air quality and ventilation, we continuing to follow, as we've been stating many times, the CDC and the Harvard Public School of Health guidelines for what that holistic risk mitigation approach is. And that's really important, thinking about air quality as a holistic approach to how we mitigate that. This is a layered strategy, which obviously we've all known about. A key layer to that is the strong mask requirement, 100%. Use of that as appropriate and we do have a mask policy. How do we de-densify our spaces? How do we have social distancing guidelines in place? Practicing good hand hygiene, and then improving the ventilation in our spaces. Those are all key layered strategies to how we have a holistic mitigation approach to have good air quality and good opportunity for a safe environment. Earlier this week, many APS staff, spoke with Dr. Joseph Allen from the Harvard School of Public Health regarding their guidelines to checking ventilation in classrooms. And he emphasized that ventilation is a part of this, but that we have to have the overall layered approach, which I just talked about. And the first recommendation is making sure we have a strong mask requirement, which can reduce transmission by 95% when using the appropriate mask that is recommended. Harvard's guidelines are also focused on classroom spaces and not larger areas such as auditorium, the gym, or the art or music room. But Dr. Allen did share that the target is 4 to 6 ACH, air changes per hour, and believes that schools can and have met the target of 4 to 6 by utilizing various lower cost strategies like opening windows or doors. And obviously what we've been talking about doing is adding portable certified air cleaning devices in each classroom. And we've ordered that, and we can have, there may be questions about that. School board members, if you have questions, Kathleen will be available after my presentation to talk about, as she was part of that meeting with Dr. Allen. Next slide, please. Also, CMTA visited every school on Monday to get the correct ceiling height in order to convert the ventilation data to air changes per hour. And having that correct classroom volume is critical so that we can convert into the ASHRAE design ventilation data to the air quality to understand the air change per hour. very important. We're getting into this detail, but it's critical for everyone to understand that we are looking so closely at this. And CMTA did determine, the consultants, that 98.5% of our classrooms with one of the CACD, which we've ordered it for all of our classrooms, meets the 4 to 6 air quality change target recommended by Dr. Allen, Joseph Allen. And this calculation excludes any recirculated air. And so the remaining 1.5% of classrooms, which were 5 classrooms at Montessori and 17 at Jamestown, those classrooms will be provided a second CACD. And Dr. Allen from Harvard also suggested the ability to open windows, of course, as an option to increase outside air in those classrooms. And so by providing a second CACD unit in those 22 classrooms, the 17 at Jamestown and the 5 at Montessori, this will bring all of our classrooms into the recommended 4 to 6 air quality change per hour target. And using outside air, the CACDs, and the equivalent outside air calculations for recirculated air brings most of our classrooms even to the 6 air quality changes per hour, but all within that target that was shared by Dr. Allen in terms of the 4 to 6. So a lot of detail there, I know, and it was very, very specific, but I'm sure there may be questions on that, and Ms. Lynn will be available to help with some of those questions after the presentation. Next slide, please. Meals has been another big question. And a lot of work has gone into preparing for lunch. We have been following the CDC and Virginia Department of Health guidance on eating, specifically indoor eating as well. What are their guidance around that? And we've created a guidance document for schools to make sure that they have the details on how breakfast and lunch will be provided. There are 3 ways that can be provided through that guidance. One is in person with 6-foot distancing between desks, physical barriers, clear partitions at each desk, and staff supervision. And this is a common one that would be more for elementary. In larger communal spaces, such as a cafeteria or a gym, it is 10-foot distancing or 6-foot distancing with physical barriers like a clear partition and staff supervision, of course. And then a third very important one, which you heard many callers earlier speak to, is outdoor eating. And this is obviously one that's very much one when conditions allow with staff supervision, and we will encourage schools to provide lunch outside as feasible when conditions allow for it. So let's talk a little bit more about the third one, which there have been many questions about on the next slide, please. The plans just mentioned that I just talked about for indoor lunch have been communicated previously. As we prepared for the hybrid day, we've had information on that. And again, all of that is in accordance with the safety guidelines that we've been receiving from CDC and VDH on that. Additionally, we convened an internal working group to develop ideas and general guidance for schools to use when making decisions about outdoor lunch, as we do encourage that. Schools would be encouraged to use outdoor spaces to the extent possible to help improve physical distancing. And of course, we recognize every school has a different challenge and opportunity to organize outside lunch, and they're going to need to use our guidance to determine what is best for their students on any given day. So the next slide will speak to the guidance. We've developed guidance for making decisions about outdoor lunch, which is driven by 3 primary factors: weather conditions, the availability of equitable or accessible outdoor space and seating, and then the staffing to supervise students during those meals. There are a lot of other factors, of course, that schools will use to ensure outdoor lunch is provided in a way that's equitable for all. And we know that some students will not want to or be able to eat outside. And I've received from parents, some parents saying they don't want their children to eat outside. So we trying to find a way to make sure that we provide availability for all this. But when we think about outdoor lunch, there are 3 key primary factors. Weather. Obviously, this is a consideration when we determine whether we can be outside. And factors limiting outdoor meals would obviously be high winds or ice or wet grounds and the temperature. So the guidance will be clear that if the wind chill is 32 or above, that it is generally safe, obviously with appropriate winter clothing, to be able to eat outside. And schools would then also have to consider when it gets temperature much higher as we move into this, May and June time, that the blacktops and other surfaces are not too hot for outdoor lunch. So weather is a key one. Space and seating. We also recognize that different space considerations schools have and the different seating options, and schools have to implement creative solutions to the extent possible, like how do they use their blacktop, hard spaces? How do they use playing fields, green spaces? Obviously, if the ground is dry. So a lot of those considerations, courtyards that might be reconfigured, existing seating available, such as picnic tables, bleachers. So those are some of the many considerations that our schools will need to make. Schools will be making these decisions for their schools using the guidance, and they will clearly communicate their plans to families. And all of the full guidance will be posted online as our schools work through this measure, the new guidance that they're receiving from us on outdoor eating. Next slide, please. Another big question that we receive a lot of is transportation. So there's a lot to transportation, a lot of changes. So we're creating a video that will be shared with families next week to explain exactly what they can expect regarding transportation services. And I want to ensure that families know that school buses are running very differently with different procedures requiring that only students who are assigned to a bus stop and a route are able to ride on that bus. Again, only students who are assigned to a bus stop and that route are able to ride on that bus. And so we have to make sure that in advance, everyone has patience as we work through this first week, I think, of different procedures and different schedules. And we will be working towards making sure that we all learn this new way of doing this. Transportation information for all students eligible for bus service will be posted in Parent View by Friday, February 26th. And the routes are based on student data that was available to us on February. And this included whether the student is coming back to school in a hybrid model, or whether they told us in the fall survey that they would use APS transportation. And so to ensure we could develop and have our drivers learn these new routes for the first day, and any changes made after that are not going to be able to be incorporated into the first routing. And so Transportation Services has checked the data, worked with the consultant to develop entirely new routes, training drivers on these new routes, and that will be happening over the next week, learning these new routes for our drivers. And due to the precise scheduling, transportation cannot make change stops, routes, or pickup times, or make any other special accommodations. So clearly what I'm trying to emphasize is that this will look a little differently than for those families and students who've ridden our transportation previously. Obviously, the bus and route stops will look different. We have to adjust to 11 riders per bus, shorter routes moving quickly back and forth to schools, pick up maybe earlier to allow buses to pick up more students before the start time. And students will only have one bus stop, and those who are not assigned will not be permitted to ride. I'll say that again. So it is really critical that we have the accurate information on the riders who truly need and expect to use the service. So if you have a student who signed up for bus service and you do not need it, please contact your school as soon as possible. For those of you that filled that out in the fall and you're saying you do not need it or we're not like that now, please let your school know as soon as possible. And again, a lot of information I just went over. We will have a video that we'll be sharing with families next week to explain a little bit more about what transportation looks like. And next slide, please. But with all of this talk about return to in person, we know that many families have requested and want to and will remain in distance learning. So because of that, we did have a distance learning task force that spent quite some time reviewing and thinking about what we could do to improve and what we could do to continue to support distance learning as it currently is now and as it currently will. And we felt it was very important to identify strategies and solutions for some of the challenges that we've encountered, and what are some of the successes that we might be able to continue and changes that are necessary. So the task force was composed of participants representing a variety of perspectives to show, from various lenses what their experience was like. Most of our APS students obviously have been exclusively getting this right now since the start of the school year. And all students will continue to participate in distance learning in some iteration. So even in the hybrid version, there are some students who will still have distance learning partially, and then others fully. Our pre-K to second graders will either participate in full distance learning or they will have 2 days of instruction, as I've shared. And then we still have the asynchronous learning on Mondays. So to that end, we felt it was very important for stakeholders to be able to identify some strategies and solutions to support students' academic and their social emotional growth. So let me share a couple of those. Next slide, please. First of all, many thanks to the 75, there were 75 participants And thank you to Assistant Superintendent Bridget Loft, who led this task force for putting this all together. 75 participants, teachers, students, administrators, ITCs, student services. I mean, the list goes on, parents, members of our advisory committees, ACTL gave some great input and feedback. Our members of our Arlington Special Ed Advisory Committee, ASAC, and also the SEPTA, Special Ed PTA. Many participants were part of this to provide good feedback. They met for 6 weeks and focused on some key areas. That group facilitated some feedback that they received from focus groups. That was done by DTL in November. They reviewed that. Progress reports were developed by each of the 14 actual content area committees, and thank them for that. And they outlined what is going well with distance learning and what needs work. Also identified possible disparities between the learning experiences of students participating in distant learning and those engaging in in-person learning, and consideration of how the use of Canvas, which is the current learning management system we have in Teams, the video conferencing tool that APS students and staff will use for delivery and participation of instruction. So looking at all of that. And DTL staff brought the solutions and strategies identified by the task force members to principals and content area supervisors so they can use this feedback to improve our student access to learning and to further support social emotional growth as we move forward, because everyone will have some version of distance learning as a part of either hybrid or their full distance learning experience. Next slide, please. The task force members worked in grade level and content area groups, and they focused on issues related to pre-K to first grade, 2nd to 5th grade, middle school, 9th and 10th grade, 11th and 12th grade, and then CTE. So they had small content area groups that really dug deeper into those levels of our students. And here are a couple of the themes that were echoed in each of these subgroups. While Canvas has been our learning management system for the past 4 years, there was no articulated expectations that teachers use it exclusively until May of 2020. So we've had it for 4 years, but really people didn't start exclusively using it in the way that we're using it now until May of 2020. And then it was announced that all teachers would be expected to use Canvas all by June 30 of 2021. So teachers who had never used Canvas are using this school year to familiarize themselves with the APS Canvas requirements. They're participating in the many professional learning opportunities available to them, and other teachers are expert users and have built very accessible Canvas courses. And so the task force really identified a need for consistent use of Canvas homepages and module templates within each school to provide for easy access to assignments, because there's such a range of how they're currently being used. And again, that's no fault of our teachers, because it's not something that they had used by and large and weren't expected to use, and then it was very quickly asked of them to use it. So there's a wide range that we need to support them with, but clearly the task force, the key takeaway was how to make sure we had consistency in that. Also, when APS moved to distance learning in mid-March of last year, staff and students learned how to use Microsoft Teams as a primary platform for all their video conferencing, delivery of instruction, etc. And Teams certainly has evolved this year as Microsoft learned from us and other educators about the unique needs of instruction. But the task force noted the fundamental importance of being able to navigate from whole group learning to small breakout rooms in which smaller groups can then apply their learning and practice skills. The need for platforms for private communication between teachers and students so that students can signal their teacher that they need help without feeling stigmatized in the larger group. And also the need for students to regularly use their cameras. And APS guidance to teachers at the start of the year was to allow students to choose whether to turn on their cameras. And we acknowledged then, and we continue to acknowledge, and I'm very clear, that students may be uncomfortable displaying their living spaces to their peers or may not have the internet bandwidth to support the data used for cameras to be on at all times. So during the first semester, we received consistent feedback from teachers, parents, advisory committees, participants in the task force learning groups, that when students consistently have their cameras turned off, it is difficult to really engage with them and find their level of engagement in the lesson, to determine if students are really experiencing social emotional distress, and for staff to really build a meaningful relationship with students. So we know this is a difficult area, but it's a critical one. And so in response to these challenges and their impact on instruction, We now ask staff to encourage students to turn on their cameras during synchronous instruction, not require, but encourage them more, especially while interacting with peers and staff members. Staff can recommend, also ways to consider using a common background. Unfortunately, Teams offers some options for that. And it is very important to know, and I've gotten questions about this in emails, that students' grades should not be infected and will not be affected or in any way if they're not using their cameras. The point here is that staff can begin to work with students and their parents to understand the concerns related to the camera use. Is there strategies we could help them with, and find more ways to encourage them? Task force participants underscored the importance of developing a strong sense of community between students participating in distance learning and those reporting in person. And so some suggestions that came out included assigning hybrid buddies to distance learning peers, or ensuring that both groups of students participate in morning meeting or TA together, and providing then time for students to interact with one another during unstructured times during the school day. Task force members also acknowledged the importance of ensuring that distance learning students have access to the same supplies, the resources and materials to which their in-person peers have access to. So many schools have made it a practice for students and parents to pick up hard copies of materials and supplies from School Weekly, and we need to make sure that we continue to support that. Teachers of grades 3 through 12 participated in professional learning on February 4th. I've already mentioned that. And that was another key takeaway from the task force, is how do we support our teachers in being able to learn how to deliver via the concurrent model, using the new technologies, which I talked about earlier, about the amplification of sound and how students can engage with their peers who are in person and those that are in class via distance learning. This is definitely going to be an area, again, that we'll need to provide more support from, but it was a key takeaway regarding moving to distance learning. Next slide, please. There have also been a lot of questions and interest from our community in athletics and the guidelines around how we participate in competitions and when we'll participate in competitions. So I want to provide a little bit of overview on that. Next slide, please. We have created a matrix for decision-making regarding traveling outside of Arlington for any competition that really guides all of our decisions moving forward. There are 5 guiding questions that you can see here on the slide. And if more than 2 of these has a no response to them for any given event, our teams will not be participating for the health and safety of our athletes. We even saw in the CDC most recent guidance that came out that athletics and participation in athletics should be a last area for us to move forward with in mitigation. But we in Arlington have had our students participating in athletics. So this is really about then when do we allow them to travel outside for competitions. And so I also want to note that APS is currently finalizing the plan for spectators that will be coming soon. That was another question that's been asked of us. But you can clearly see if there are more than 2, is the sport played outside? For sports where APS requires masks, will the opponent team be wearing masks? Some do not require that. But if they're not, then that would obviously be a no. Here's a key one for us as well. Is the positivity rate in the locality where the competition will occur less than 10%? Does the sport have limited physical interaction with the opponent during competition? And then can our athletes participate without overnight stay required? So if we have 2 or more of these, if the answer is no, we'll look at them case by case in terms of the competitions, because each have unique circumstances to them and specific challenges. And so we have to look at them uniquely. It's not a blanket, we can or cannot attend. So I wanted to make sure, provide a little more clarity on the decision rubric that is being used by our directors of student activities and our as we look at this. Next slide, please. Finally, I always have a long monitor report, but finally at the end, we like to conclude with financial projections. Next slide, please. This is our revenue projections. There are no changes from the last meeting in February 4th. So we still currently have a decrease of 5.4 million in revenue projections. We'll continue to keep that informed about any changes, as I've also received a lot of emails and questions about, well, we're hearing that in DC and Capitol Hill, there are potentially new CARES Act funding or money coming for COVID relief for schools. We're hearing that too, but we do not, that's obviously not been official. So that is not reflected here because we do not know what that will ultimately look like at the end after President Biden would sign any of that. So for many people who've emailed me and asked, we do not know that yet, but right now this is what we currently know, a decrease of 5.4 million. Next slide. Our cost projections, the total expenditures as it currently stands is 13.21 million. No changes since the last report on February 4th, but as we move into in-person learning and we will need to potentially have additional costs, this may change, but we're continuing to monitor that. But right now, since February 4th, that still stayed the same. Next slide, savings. We've also looked at our fiscal year 21 budget for savings, and there are no changes since February 4th in this slide with a 9.6 million savings. However, I do anticipate that Assistant Superintendent Leslie Peterson at our next board meeting will be providing a mid-year fiscal monitoring report, and I do believe that we may be able to update with some additional data as we work through that. So on March 11th at our next meeting, you may see some more information there. And so finally, the next slide, this slide just summarizes the total shortfall that we currently see. And in this case, we don't have a current shortfall because we have included the allocation of 15 million from our fiscal year 20 closeout. And we also are fortunate to have received the additional CARES Act funding from December, which put us in a much better position currently. But we will continue to incur some expenses related to COVID-19 and returning to in-person. So we have to remain vigilant on this. And any changes from these estimates, we will continue to provide. So right now, because of the use of the closeout funding and because of the additional CARES Act funding, we're in a better spot than I had been previously showing to show approximately $6 million surplus there in our projections. And with that very long presentation, Chair O'Grady, I'll conclude and turn it back to you. For questions.
Dr. Ron, for this very informative presentation. With that, I'd like to turn to my colleagues to see if they have any comments and questions, and I'd like to start with Mr. Pretty. Mr. Pretty.
Yes, thank you, Chair O'Grady. I'm actually excited to get back to school. Dr. Duran, I support your efforts in the return to school process. The level of detail and different factors that have gone into the return to school plan is overwhelming. I appreciate the thought and consideration that has gone into the return to school plan. And I'm looking forward to sending my 5th grader back on March 9th and my 8th grader back on March 16th. I usually have a question on ventilation and CACD units, but the presentation was very thorough. I want to commend you on getting that conversation going with Dr. Allen at Harvard, with CMTA as well, our consultants, and comparing that with the ASHRAE code. And if I can add something from our conversation earlier in the week that wasn't presented tonight, that 200 CACD units 200 more were ordered 2 days ago, and our plan is to order more. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. And I'm glad CMTA has reviewed the room configuration, and so we can get the filter issue behind us. One of the comments that we had earlier on your staff feedback, and it said, I believe it was 17% concerns on the concurrent instruction. And then we had a caller tonight also call in and comment on the concurrent model. And one of the callers asked for us as board members to be in a concurrent classroom. So I'm just going to answer that with a yes. I will be in one, whether it's virtually or actually in person, probably virtually, because my kids are going to be in that model. So there will be some feedback from there too. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. I'll let somebody else go, but I have other questions as well. But we could just come back next time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pretty. Mr. Goldstein.
Yeah, thank you. So we've all been focusing on and anxiously awaiting the time we can return to in-classroom learning. And those days are close now, although the pandemic and its, choppy waters are still present and will be, and they'll be with us for a while. So I want to emphasize, and I'll continue to emphasize, that the classroom experience when we return will not be the same as January of last year. January 2020 is gone. Students will be both in person and virtual. So will teachers. Classrooms will be half filled. Buses will be less than a quarter filled. Masks and PPE will be a predominant concern, as will testing and contact tracing and daily health screenings. We've had nearly a year of a much different schooling experience. Our return to the buildings will also be a different school experience, but a different kind of different. So I think it's very, very important that everybody realize that we are going into a different kind of different. You know, like I said, January 2020 is a long way away and it's getting farther away. So it's unrealistic to think that we come back into the buildings and everything is going to be just like we knew it to be prior to the pandemic. Of course, we're working towards and hoping that we will be able to come out of this pandemic and we will be able to get back to, you know, pretty much everybody's definition of normal. That's not going to be the case when we first return, you know, early next month. So I do have a couple of questions for Dr. Duran. Monique, I'm not sure how you want to handle this, if you want me to go now or you want to circle back. But
we'll be circling back.
Okay.
If you want to start picking up to 2 questions at this point, Mr. Goldstein, we can have you. If you would like, I can come back, however.
It's completely up to you.
I tell you what, I'll come back around and move along to Ms. Diaz-Torres. Ms.
Okay,
Diaz-Torres?
Well, thank you. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the Herculean effort that has gone on over the past year to even get us to this point. It has been, I've seen so much of this in my time on the school board thus far, but it has been nights, it has been weekends, it has been 14-plus-hour days, it has been 4 a.m. phone calls, it has been hours upon hours upon hours of research and intense focus on rules that are just constantly changing and having to adapt to those rules that are constantly changing. And I don't want to even begin to talk about this without acknowledging all of the people who contributed to creating this plan. It is so important that we remember that there has been a lot of work that has gone into this. Is it a perfect plan? No, because no plan can ever be perfect. But I am very confident in what we have thus far. I am very confident in the plan that our team has put together, that we are as prepared as we possibly can be to bring kids back into schools in less than 2 weeks. And so I want to thank everyone who contributed to this and all of the hard work that has gone somewhat unrecognized by many, I'm sure. I see you, and I know that there are so many of us in our community that see that. I also want to echo some of the comments that my colleague, Mr. Goldstein, mentioned. We are a school system, but ultimately we are a system of human beings, and we need to take care of each other. And this plan, the success or the failure of this plan is going to come down to all of us individually making choices in every classroom, in every hallway, every single day that are going to benefit the communal good. It means wearing masks even when you might not want to wear your mask. It means making sure that you are social distancing. It means making sure that you are wiping things down. It means making sure that you're opening windows per guidance and recommendations when it is safe to do so. And it is going to take so much work to make this work, but we have the right people to do it. We are ready to take this step. And we are ready to bring our kids back to school. And we will respond to what we see as we go along. And as we get new data that comes in from our daily screening, and as we see additional vaccines become available, and as we see additional mitigation measures become available, we will continue to evolve and we will continue to adapt. But I just wanted to pause and thank everyone who has put so much work into this, because it has been a lot of work, but we are ready to take this step. And thank you, Dr. Duran, specifically for leading us in this effort. And I am excited to see kids back into classrooms, and I'm excited to see what we do in this next step. I will have questions, but I will pass it on to my other colleagues for opening statements.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz-Torres. I'd like to go to our Vice Chair, Dr. Cannon. And Dr. Cannon.
Yes, thank you, Ms. O'Grady, and thank you, Dr. Duran. Yeah, I just have 2 comments, and the one is very specific on the financial projections. And this is just my input from one board member that for you all to consider. You know, when we started this school year, we were in a kind of place you never want to see yourself in. We had a deficit in our current budget. We had struggled to balance it when the pandemic hit. Took some cuts we didn't want to take, you know, got to that balance. By the time school started, projections for revenues were down and we were facing a deficit. And we wanted to be completely transparent with the community. We knew we had to do this constant work. We wanted the county board to be aware of our status. And so we have been looking at our finances at every single board meeting. And now finally, I think this happened maybe a meeting or 2 ago, we are, because of the allocation of our closeout funds, we're in the black, and we have a mid-year report coming up. I would just like to share as one board member, if we continue to be in the black by the time we get to that mid-year report, we're a little back into how we normally are. And would like to suggest that at that point, to keep ourselves focused at these meetings, that we could then go back to our regular reporting for our finances, rather than having to do it at every meeting. If we're in the black, we're in the black. And you know that, of course, there may be some things you want to share with us, new COVID relief funds, things like that. But if there isn't anything new and we continue to be healthy again, or healthy enough, I would just like to share that that's something that we don't necessarily have to talk about at every meeting, from my perspective. A lot has already been said. I'm thanking you, Dr. Duran, our entire staff, you know, all the work that's been done. I won't belabor that, but just do want to specifically shout out our teachers and school-based staff. Listening to your description, Dr. Duran, of, you know, the new technology and things that teachers are learning, I'm just reminded that you know, we've all gotten a chance to visit classes, seeing how teachers are working, the skills they've developed, how adept they are, seeing what the kids are doing. This is not a place any of us wanted to be in terms of how we're teaching and learning, but the skills, the dedication, the resilience, it's been extraordinary. And really just want to give that shout out to our teachers and staff, you know, at how tremendously hard they've worked. When you announced, you know, I also applaud. I've been a fan this, you know, for the last several months as you've, you know, brought more activity into our buildings. I've supported that all along. I absolutely support our return dates, and I'm very excited about it. Like, as my colleagues have said, one of the first emails we got from a teacher after those dates were announced, a teacher expressed some thoughts and reservations, but closed that note by saying, but you know, I'm excited to see my students. I'm really excited to finally see my students, and just want to share that I'm excited at how wonderful it is going to be. We have many teachers and many students who are going to be seeing each other in person for the first time, and I'm really excited about that. I suspect my colleagues will do as I'm going to do. I plan to get out to some of my liaison schools and staying distant with a mask, staying outside, but you know, I'll be waving and cheering folks on, and I'm just really excited to see all this activity headed back into our school buildings. And thank you, everyone, for all your hard work and for sticking with us. Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. I will not have questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cannon, and appreciate that. And I also want to share my gratitude for where we are right now. And I want to start off with our staff and our teachers who have been working all year long to support our students, who have been stepping up and learning different ways to address the needs and to teach our students during the distance learning portion of our school year. I want to also thank our county board leadership and the state for working to make sure that our teachers could be prioritized and our staff could be prioritized in the vaccine distribution. That is an important aspect, and I think that that is helping make the transition back into school easier, though I know that the vaccine is not required for us to move back into in-person learning. I do think it is helpful for some of our staff to feel more comfortable with moving back into our buildings. I also really want to thank Dr. Duran and our executive leadership team for working round the clock to address the issues and the concerns and to address the safety measures and the different metrics that we need to address in order to get back in the building. We have been working towards this for a long time, and it is time for us to bring the plan to fruition. We've been preparing our buildings to be able to accept students in our buses at 6 feet apart so that we can adhere to CDC guidelines. We have been working as well to secure the items that we need to keep our staff and our students safe by preparing to have masks available and other items to increase the safety in our buildings so that our children can return to in-person learning. And Dr. Duran, your presentation tonight is, again, another example of how we have been listening to the community, listening to questions, and been investigating ideas and working to take those suggestions into account as we continue to move forward to coming back to in-person learning. And as my colleague, Ms. Diaz-Torres pointed out, this is not a one-sided situation. In order for us to be successful in returning to school and in-person learning, it is definitely a joint prospect. We are going to need our students to come back ready to wear masks. We're going to need our students ready to understand what 6 feet of distance is, and our families can help us with that. Our families can help prepare the students who are coming back by asking them to really wash their hands and do so with intent. And we also just want to make sure that you as parents fill out the app so we can continue to understand what the situation is in our community, so we can understand if there is an issue or a problem that will help us return to school safely. This has been quite the effort, and we are at the point where we are ready to bring our students back to school. Dr. Duran, I support your decision and your phased-in process. It builds on the phased-in process we've had in place since November. We've had students come in. We've had the opportunity for months at a time to understand how to do this safely. We are ready to go. And I would encourage you to continue to listen and also to continue to communicate as we go back, as parents may have questions about the very intricate details that go into bringing our students back. So I want to thank you for that work. And I too will be out there with Dr. Cannon and ready to welcome our students back. I know it will be a positive experience for the students who are coming back to see their teachers and their staff in the buildings. So I want to thank you for that. And now I'm going to go back around, but go back to Mr. Pretty and give him the opportunity to ask some questions. Mr. Pretty.
All right. Thank you, Chair O'Grady. Appreciate it. So now that ventilation is out of the way with the comments from the last go round, I'll go to the other main mitigation topic, in my eyes at least, which is lunch. So just to clarify, the CDC is allowing indoor lunch, and the state of Virginia is allowing indoor lunch. Is that correct?
Well, mitigation strategies are in place for any opportunity to eat, and I'll invite Mr. Pope that can share a little bit more about our review of the CDC and the VDH guidance with regards to eating.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Duran, and good evening, board members and Mr. Pretty. If you actually look, there's an inconsistency in the application of indoor dining versus the mitigation strategies that they've given for cafeteria use. So, excuse me, if you look at this as the Swiss cheese effect, what we're trying to accomplish is cohorting and all the other mitigation strategies that you would not see in indoor dining. You're not seeing symptom screening at restaurants. You're not seeing cohorting. Only those people are going in and coming out. To accomplish, in addition to those things, the Virginia Department of Health and CDC provided to avoid congregate gatherings in mass and large groups, and that we need to consider serving meals in classrooms or other alternate ways within cohorts, but that indoor cafeteria lunch or breakfast is available as long as we're doing all the other mitigation strategies as well.
Okay. Thank you. The other question I had was, I think Chair O'Grady touched on it, was the symptom screener. So I understand the need to have a screener. We, as an APS employee, staff has had to do it for a couple weeks now on a daily basis. So that's an active habit, so to speak. Now, and I understand it helps with the contact tracing, but for parents and for kids, as you mentioned, Dr. Duran, this is a big change. And what if the screener is not completed? How are we communicating that piece? Obviously, if it's tied to parent view, I assume that 100% of the students returning have parent view active, so we can get an active number. Just can you talk about the communication efforts that are going out to the community in order to make sure they understand this?
Well, one thing about the communication, like I said, we will have a detailed video that kind of walks through the protocol and what are the steps to do this. But Mr. Pope, if you want to also add a little bit more about the use of it. So 2 parts of your question, Mr. Pretty. Communication, we're developing videos and we'll be sending out messages starting next week, and we'll repeat that to have opportunities for people families and community members to understand what that looks like. But Zach, if you'll talk a little bit more about the actual implementation of that on the school side.
So just like our employee data comes from Oracle Stars, it's a one-way feed to Qualtrics, which is a customer experience platform, pretty robust online surveying and so forth. We're pulling all of that data from Synergy. Parent View is just an application of that. So parents' information, regardless whether their Parent View account is active or not, we have their information in Synergy. It's the same application, and it gets pulled over. What we're looking for is 2 main pieces. We're looking for their parent email, the email address that we contact them with to do annual verifications and so forth, and a phone number that specifically is identified as cell phone text capable. Those 2 pieces are what will receive the screening information and invitation, 1 per student that they have enrolled in the school division to complete that. The actual screener is just that online form, similar to what employees are receiving right now, available in multiple languages. If at the end they're not cleared to report to in-person instruction or activities, they'll see a big X, they'll have their date and timestamp, and then the system will automatically generate a letter from their school principal with follow-up steps on how they can be cleared and who they can contact if they have questions. If they are cleared, it'll be a big green check mark with the big date and timestamp, the student's information that they can show at the bus or at the individual school. We have made provisions to be able to do this offline because we know that there's not network capability at our bus stops. So if someone does show up, the bus attendants and bus drivers, along with the school-based staff, if they're kind of out in the kiss and ride areas, so forth, and somebody has not completed that, they'll be able to do that screening there on site, do their Qualtrics actual survey on behalf of that student right then and there, and submit that for them.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pretty. I'd like to then go to Mr. Goldstein. Mr.
Yeah, thank you. So in the last, I don't know, several weeks, one of the more contentious, if not the most contentious topic I've heard is around the concurrent model. And I have to say, I need some more elaboration on this. I really don't have a good understanding of how a teacher is going to be teaching to both, physical in classroom students and virtual. So if you could, help me with that. And also, I know that the teachers had some professional development on this, but what I don't know is what was taught? What are the strategies for doing both in person and virtual, with the same instructor? So if you could shed some light on that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, and I'll ask Assistant Superintendent Bridget Loft. She can provide an overview of that and also the professional development that was set up by her.
Sure. So I'll start with the professional learning. Our high school, middle school, and 3rd through 5th grade teachers had the opportunity to participate in a 90-minute session with each group with Dr. Catlin Tucker, who is a renowned expert on blended learning. Our high school and middle school teachers also had the opportunity to, they had 2 days of asynchronous professional learning so that they could focus on beginning to prepare for the concurrent model. And I want to emphasize beginning because there's quite a process in getting ready to deliver that instruction. They also had the opportunity to work on improving or adding to their knowledge of facets of Microsoft Teams that support the delivery of instruction, and then some other professional learning that help them start to think about how they might plan for this model. So one of the things that Catlin Tucker really talks about is the idea of station rotation. So if you think about that, you're a teacher in the concurrent model, you have some of your students joining the class from home via distance learning using Microsoft Teams. And then you've got the other students in person in front of you and trying to sort of create that classroom community and provide opportunities for students to interact with each other over the platform. That the delivery of instruction one of the strategies that Catlin Tucker talked about is that perhaps you start the lesson together and have perhaps the delivery of new content. So the students are distance learning or joining via Teams, and the teacher is using some of the new technologies that they'll have a chance to work with, using a webcam, for example, that can act as a document camera so that those students at home can see the same thing that the students in the classroom can see. So you might start all together, and then you might break up into different groups. It could be that the teacher works for a period of time with the students who are joining from a distance, so is talking with them through Teams, while the students in person are working on an application activity. And then she swaps, or he swaps, and he works with the students in person on deepening that content or that concept that was introduced at the beginning of class, while the students at home are working on the application activity. It could also be that the students are grouped together where you've got some kids participating in distance learning in a small group and some kids who are there in hybrid in that same small group, again, using the Teams platform to work with one another. So there are a variety of ways to deliver instruction in a way that doesn't have students working solely on their iPads and or on their devices, and also promotes interaction with one another that they would have had had everybody been in person. So that was really sort of the crux of the beginning of the presentation of how to think about how to organize your students. I think the other factor that's really important with the successful delivery of instruction via concurrent model is the technologies. And I really want to thank the hard work of our information services partners and of Sarah Putnam, the Director of Curriculum and Instruction, in really doing several sandboxes with kids. So just recently, just this week, we worked with elementary students in the instructional learning support program and in level 1 classes to really watch how kids are interacting with one another in a concurrent model. And then identifying the appropriate technologies. So that would be microphones, for example, that allow the students to hear the students at home to hear their classmates who are in person. I mentioned the webcam as another example of a piece of technology that really makes that delivery of instruction more fluid. The teacher will also have a headset with a microphone so that they can communicate clearly through their mask to the students who are learning at home. So I think it's the combination of the technologies and then the thinking about how do we involve the active engagement of both groups of students that we're really working with teachers. And I'll acknowledge that this is a fundamentally different experience in delivering instruction than I would wager most of our teachers have ever done, and most of our students have ever participated in. And so there is an ongoing need for professional learning and a chance for our teachers to really have time to experiment with this technology before their students start. And so Dr. Duran mentioned early on in this most recent weekly email that we send to staffs, we sent sort of a narrative of the equipment that they'd be receiving along with pictures so that they could start to visualize how would they set up their classroom. Folks will be getting videos next week, and we are considering how else we can provide time for teachers to really begin to apply this learning.
Mr. Goldstein, you're on mute.
I don't know how that happened. All right, thank you. Thank you, Bridget. That was very helpful. I learned a lot in your presentation, your description there. So thank you for that. I got a quick question. You talked about the need or the desire for there to be a classroom community with both the in-person and the distance students. Will those students who are attending virtually, will they be on a screen in the classroom so that the physically present students in the classroom can see them and vice versa?
Yeah, absolutely. There's the ability to project to the smart board or the smart panel that's in the classroom so that they'll be able to interact with each other.
Okay, all right, so visually there will be this classroom community you're talking about. Okay, thank you very much. That helps me a lot. I got one more quick question for Dr. Duran on his presentation. Maybe it's really for Zach Pope. There's been, I've seen a lot of comment about half of the staff being vaccinated. I know that was a statistic that we put out, I believe, 2 weeks ago at the last board meeting. Do you have an updated number of how many staff have been vaccinated?
Well, the number we put out the last board meeting was that half at that time had received their first dose.
Yeah.
Not fully vaccinated, but their first dose was that.
That's what I meant.
Not believe, Mr. Pope, correct me if I'm wrong, that we have received updated information. Have you recently? I know I hadn't as of yesterday, but maybe you did.
No, and we asked for that. And I do want to clarify the number that is floating around is around 1,800. That was 1,800 appointments were available for phase 1B group 3, which is all child care K-12 individuals in the county with eligible employers. We did receive the majority, and I mean overwhelming majority of those appointments. However, the health department cannot track for us whether an employee has signed up using their personal email address or not. And so it's very difficult for them to be able to give us any updated number after that one-time event as to what's going on. However, we do know that when the next event occurred, when we sent out a text message in Spanish and English, very last minute on a Friday, because they received extra doses, we had less than 300 people sign up, and that was 3 weeks after the first clinic that were part of that special one on that Saturday.
So we know that 1,800, 2,100, we know that 2,100 have been vaccinated, or we know that 2,100 is not, we can't land on it as an accurate number.
Correct, because Bishop O'Connell would be in the same bucket. Any childcare provider as well is going to be in that same number, and there have been daily appointments. Those are just 2,100 spots that were special clinics for childcare and K-12 educators. And we do know that the vast and overwhelming majority of those appointments did go to APS educators.
And we also know, Mr. Goldstein, that some of our employees also received their vaccinations in Fairfax and Loudoun, which in their first dose, which initially those localities were allowing them if they lived there. Arlington did a different approach. Every county did a different approach, but we don't know what that number is either. Anecdotally, I've heard people tell me, but we do know that there's also individuals that did that.
And we do have a good number of folks who are licensed through the Board of Health as well, OTs, PTs, SLPs, athletic trainers that were considered in different phasing and would have been invited at a different time as well. So that's another group of staff that would have been receiving invitations in a different manner.
But as we're getting more doses, we're opening up more appointments, right?
The county, that is correct.
The county is, yeah. Yeah, okay. All right, so that helps me understand that number that's been floating around. Okay, thank you. That's the extent of my questions, Monique. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dran, Zach, Bridget.
Fine, we do appreciate it. I'm going to move on to Ms. Diaz-Torres. Ms. Diaz-Torres.
Thank you, Chair O'Grady. I just have two relatively quick questions. The first one is on the camera attendance policy, and I just have a couple of clarifying questions. The camera use policy. Sorry, I'm combining the question with the topic. The first question is attendance contingent on students having their camera on?
No.
Good. Okay. And are students who do not have their camera on or do not feel comfortable with their camera on should have a conversation with their teacher to identify what are the strategies that can be used for them to feel comfortable, correct?
Yes, correct.
Great. And that will not be held against them in any way.
That will not be held against them. We've heard that could be, we've heard people say they were going to lose points, lower grade, attendance. No.
Great.
The policy is now to encourage students to turn it on and to actively find ways to help them do that, as opposed to just saying, well, you don't have to turn it on.
Right. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. The second question is about the consistency, the themes from the Distance Learning Task Force. One of the themes was the use of Canvas, and you mentioned the idea of sharing that template and making it consistent within the schools. Are we also thinking about sharing across schools and creating mechanisms, particularly now as we're moving to concurrent? We have some teachers who have figured out how to really use that Canvas platform to support what they're going to be doing in concurrent. Have we thought about mechanisms for them to be able to share across schools so that we're really maximizing on our excellent teaching that's happening no matter where it is?
Ms. Love, if you can help respond to that, I know that's an area that the task force was looking at how to increase that consistency. So if you could respond to what's being done there. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, and in fact, we've got a precedent of really turning to our folks who've demonstrated mastery with a variety of technologies, Canvas included. If you recall back last school year when we took the last week of school to really start to get our teachers ready to deliver instruction via distance learning full-time. We asked and several folks responded, and these are folks who have current teachers who have really demonstrated proficiency with Canvas and with some of the other digital tools, and they were able to deliver professional learning across the county so that folks could see that. We continue to leverage that kind of mastery and skills as we move into this school year. In fact, we've had quarterly professional learning opportunities for folks to really acclimate to Canvas. We did have many teachers who started this school year, not at all proficient, really sort of basic with Canvas, and they've been able to leverage the support of their ITCs and the support of their school, their colleagues in their schools, as well as these professional learning opportunities to build those skill sets, such that by the time that we finish this school year, it's the expectation that every teacher and staff person can meet the basic expectations of proficiency in Canvas. And we have published a checklist along with opportunities for folks to build those skills and move beyond that. So to your point, Ms. Diaz-Torres, absolutely, we are leveraging the proficiency of folks who really are our Canvas rock stars so that we can move forward. And I would say, too, our principals are sharing some of their practices with their staff with one another so that they can learn from one another and affect change on a broader scale.
Okay, it's good to hear. I think it has been a very trying time for many of our parents who have students at different schools or who have students even within the same school that are having very dramatically different Canvas experiences. So I think that it's very critical that as we're shifting into this hybrid model and we're shifting into a slightly different way of using Canvas, that we are tapping into the incredible expertise that we have, really singing praises for the people who have learned how to use this technology and use it well, and then helping pass on and scale those learnings to others. I do not have any additional questions. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz-Torres. And I understand that our Vice Chair, Dr. Cannon, does not have any questions at this time. I just wanted to say that was a question I was going to ask Ms. Diaz-Torres about how we can utilize the teachers who are having stellar experiences and creating fantastic lessons, how they might be able to share their lessons with colleagues and kind of share the wealth. I know that we've seen some of that going on with our virtual learning, and just wanted to make sure that we have something in place so that teachers can share best practices with one another. So that's important. I do have one last question, and it is about the certified air cleaning devices. And there has been some concern about the placement of those devices so they could work most efficiently in our classrooms, and wanted to understand if we do have a plan as to where those actual devices should be placed in the classrooms.
And I'll ask Ms. Lynn if she could help respond to that. Ms. Lynn.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair O'Grady, thank you, Dr. Duran. We are working with our maintenance team to make sure that there are clear directions on where to place them in their classrooms. You most likely don't want to place them near a window if you're opening a window, because that's already bringing in your fresh air. What the directions actually say is that it's a 360 device, so it's taking in air from all directions. So you want to keep it at least 4 feet away from any other object. And we also want to make sure that when it's installed in a classroom, that it's safely installed with the electrical cord, so it's not a tripping hazard as well. So we will work closely with our maintenance team to make sure that when they deliver it, they give clear instructions. Our custodial staff, too, will also be instructed on how to actually use them and help people out at their schools, too.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lynn. I appreciate that clarity of how we're going to deploy those devices that I know so many people are excited about seeing in our classrooms.
Thank you.
With that, I think that we have exhausted all the questions for the monitoring report. Again, Dr. Duran, thank you and the staff for your preparation for our students to return to in-person learning and to continue to support those students who will continue with their virtual learning as well.
Thank you. And Chair Brady, just one last comment, and referring to a little bit what Dr. Cannon said in her comments. After this monitoring report this month, the future monitoring reports will look differently as we're now in person. So a lot of what we spend a lot of time up to this point is talking about being prepared and what we're doing prepared. So and then we will shift now to a little bit more talking about what's happening in the actual environment when we're in person and in the virtual distance learning or the hybrid. So that's what more the monitor will focus on. We also will not be having the financial component in there as well. That will be next March 11th in the mid-year report that Ms. Peterson will be sharing with everyone, and then after that, it'll be on the regular cycle. Certainly, if we have updates and questions, we'll include that, but trying to streamline and make sure that our monitoring report will be focused on what's happening in classrooms at that time. So it will look a little differently.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duran, for letting us know what we can expect in your future monitoring reports. Now we're going to move on to our information items. We have 3 information items tonight. The first is the naming committee for the new elementary school at the Key site, and that naming committee will share its recommendations. Dr. Duran.
Yes, thank you. So really excited to introduce Principal Claire Peters and one of her staff members, Jasmine Wilson, who will be presenting. We also have with us Dulce Carrillo from School and Community Relations, who was active lead in helping support this work. Thank her for that. And also some parents are here with us. We have Heather McIntyre and Rabia Ubwende, and if I said your name wrong, please I apologize for that. So welcome to our 2 parents, staff member, Principal Peters, and Ms. Carrillo, who is a part of leading this from the central office. So thank all of you for your work on this, and I'll turn it over to Principal Peters.
Thank you so much, Dr. Duran. Good evening, and good evening, Chair O'Grady and school board members. I am very excited to be here tonight with one of our science-focused parents, Rabia Ubanati, who's here to support us, and with Jasmine, who's going to begin our presentation tonight. We had, I think, a great time as a naming committee meeting and working on this, and it's been very exciting. And I'm looking forward to having you all hear our recommendations. And with that, I will turn it over to Jasmine. And we do have a presentation, so hopefully we can get that put up.
Thank you so much. Alrighty, like she mentioned, I am Jasmine Wilson. I am currently a 1st grade teacher at Arlington Science Focus. I will be a soon-to-be kindergarten teacher, so that'll be fun. I'm going to go ahead and get started with our presentation. We were the naming committee for the new elementary school at the Key site, and this is our recommendation. Just a little bit of information on the new elementary school, and thank you for, I'm sorry I did not say next slide please, but thank you for moving with me. It will be located at the currently Key Immersion Building, 2300 Key Boulevard. We also have the students from Arlington Science Focus will be the makeup of the new school. Some of the students from Arlington Science Focus. The students currently live in Roslyn, Radnor, Fort Myer Heights, Colonial Village, and Lyon Village. And we're supposed to open the neighborhood school in fall 2021. Next slide, please. The naming committee members were the new principal, Claire Peters, myself, Christine Ahern, the librarian at Arlington Science Focus, Rabia Ubanati, which is a parent, the PTA lead. We also had parents Heather McIntyre and Beth Farrell from ASFS and Key Immersion. We had a community member, Terry Prell, and a business owner, Ali Hashimi, and I'm sorry if I did not say that correctly. And then Dulce Carrillo, she was there to help take notes and make sure that everything was organized. Next slide, please. These are the pictures of us during the time. Dulce lovingly took all of those pictures of us in action. Next slide, please. We did have 3 meetings. The first meeting, we came with names that we had gotten from our designated communities, ideas that we had come up with, and the names were from themes to names of people, also like location names. And then on January 13th, we shared our community feedback, and then we created a list of 5 names. So we narrowed it down, and we also created a survey to gather the community input just to help us make a decision and to see if there was anything that we did not see that maybe we could get from the community and their thoughts. And then in February, we analyzed that feedback and we made a decision that we felt would represent the whole community and what we thought would be a good representation of the students that would be going there as well. Next slide, please. So we did come up with 5 names, and our first name, well, our names were Gateway Elementary School, Polaris Elementary School, Grace Hopper Elementary School, Summa Elementary of Arlington, Innovation Elementary School. Each name we chose, we felt Gateway was a good representation of the actual location of the school as the gateway between Arlington to Arlington from Washington. Then Polaris, we chose that name because it represented the North Star or the Pole Star. We thought it would represent the bright futures for the students. Grace Hopper Elementary School, we chose that because Grace Hopper is a role model and we wanted to honor her and we thought she would be a good role model for the children and what we hope the children to achieve at the new elementary school. Then Summa Elementary of Arlington, we like that name because it represented the whole child, the idea of not just educating the minds, but also the emotional, the artistic, all those things that make up children and the things that matter to them in their communities. And then Innovation Elementary School, we thought this would be a good representation of students, what they will need when they go into the world and what we would expect from them in the future and how we can challenge and collaborate to create these great experiences for children. Next slide, please. So we did create a survey and we sent it out January 22nd and it closed February 5th. And it was offered in English, Spanish, and Mongolian. We had 386 responses and 74 comments. I do want to add that this was a very small representation of the community that will actually be served by this elementary school. There were some things brought up in the community, in our committee, about how some parents that were maybe too busy, and even if we contacted them, if they had other things going on or just slipped their mind. So we feel like we only had a very small representation. We also didn't get many surveys from those for Spanish and Mongolian. So we don't know if they just chose to answer in English, but we also know that we didn't have as much surveys in those languages. So we felt that it wasn't a representation of the whole community. And so we also wanted to take that into consideration when we made our choice. Next slide, please. So our survey responses came from parents at 31% of students who will attend the new school, 22% of parents or guardians of students at another school, 8% APS staff members, 1% Arlington business owners, and 52%, Arlington residents or community members. Next slide, please. Then this is the responses. So we had, in our survey, we had them rank their top 3 choices. And so this is what you see here, even though the numbers are bigger than 386, which was the response amount that we got, it's because it's the combined 1, 2, 3. So if it was rated 1 or first or second or third, then that was combined in the choices. We had Grace Hopper Elementary with 650 votes, Gateway Elementary with 581 choices, Innovation with 408, Polaris with 341, and Summa Elementary of Arlington with 336. Next slide, please. We also gave this survey to the students of Arlington Science Focus. We had two ways of doing the survey. We used their Google emails, and they were able to do it on Canvas for our intermediate students. And then for the primary students, we use Seesaw so that the children could choose it. So all children had access to it. Most of our primary students are more familiar with Seesaw, so we also made that available for them. We also had a video that was made by our librarian, Mrs. Ahern, so that the students understood each choice and had some background information on each name. And this is the information that was gathered from the students. So we had 29.2 for Gateway, 27.2 for Grace Hopper, 15.7 for Innovation Elementary, and 22.1 for Polaris Elementary, and then some for Summa Elementary School of Arlington. Alrighty, and something I just want to add is that the committee did take all of the information that we got from the surveys to help us and guide our choices. But in the end, we also wanted to make a choice that we felt would represent the whole entire community.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I'm going to take over the presentation from here. So this is our final committee vote. So at our February meeting, after a lot of discussion, we all voted on our first and second choice. And I want to just pause here for a second on the votes to talk a little bit about the discussion that we had. And I think Jasmine really did a great job already capturing that our focus was really on making sure that we were really hearing the voices of the whole community, that we were thinking about a name that would represent our whole community, and that we kept the APS strategic plan goals in mind. And so we had a very significant discussion around naming a school after a person. And it was clear from both the comments that we received in the survey and also comments that our committee members brought back from their community, who potentially from people who were not able to take the survey, that naming a school after a person is a divisive choice. And we talked a lot about representation and role models for all of our students in our community. And so ultimately, although we thought that Grace Hopper was a great person and did a lot of great things, as a committee, we decided that we did not want to choose a person to name the school after. And we did have some other comments about some of the other names as well that we discussed and kind of took into consideration. So if you would like to go to the next slide, please. You can see that we did choose two choices to recommend to you all tonight. And our first choice is Innovation Elementary School, and our second choice is Gateway Elementary School. Next slide, please. So Innovation Elementary School was our first choice because we really feel like innovation represents a skill and an ideal that we want our children to get from their elementary school experience. And as a committee, we really talked about what innovation meant to us. And we landed on an idea that is based in thinking about something new, a new way of doing something. But it's not just about the newness. It's about how do you take that new idea and really make it come to life? How do you look at the challenges? How do you work with the challenges? How do you problem solve? How do you collaborate with other people? How do you think creatively to really bring that new idea to fruition? And that's really what we want from our students at Innovation Elementary School, is for them to develop those skills, those problem solving, those creative thinking, those collaboration skills. Next slide, please. And in terms of our alternate choice, Gateway Elementary School, as Jasmine already mentioned, we did think of this as a geographic feature of the Roslyn and Courthouse corridor being a gateway to Arlington from Washington, D.C., but also thinking about your education and your learning being a gateway to your future, and that that name could represent as well the idea that your elementary education is a gateway to really a bright future beyond. Next slide. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I would just like to again really thank the other members of the naming committee for their dedication, for their passion, for their discussion that they brought to the table and the representation they brought from their community. And also to thank the school board for the opportunity to go through this process and to come to you tonight and bring you these two choices for our names. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Peters, and thank you, Ms. Wilson, for your presentation for us tonight. I have been a member of a naming committee in the past, so I know what that is like, and it's an important weight to hold on your shoulders to think about how you're going to move forward and create the vision for a school. So we appreciate your hard work. I'm going to move to our one of our members, Mr. Goldstein, to see if he has any questions regarding your presentation. Mr. Goldstein.
I really don't have questions. Thank you both for the extremely informative presentation. I love it. I love the recommendation. Am I on mute again? No, I'm okay, right?
You are good, Mr. Goldstein. Continue.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the outreach that you did to your school and, larger civic communities, and the thoughtful discussion within your naming committee. I was cringing a little bit when I saw the one name, the Grace Hopper name, because I'm lately really shying away from naming schools after individuals. But it was interesting to hear your discussion about that and, not naming it after a person and stuff. So thank you. I congratulate you for all the hard work on this, and I look forward to this is coming to us for a vote when? The next meeting, March 11th?
That's correct.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Ms. Diaz-Torres.
I also don't have a lot of questions, more of a comment at this point. I appreciated the nuance with which you approached the conversation about your survey data and recognizing that there was some complexity and some nuance in getting survey data and then finding other creative ways to bring in voices of the community and make sure that you are really representing your entire community. So I just really appreciated that. I'm excited to see both of these recommendations and excited to have our vote in 2 weeks. So thank you all so much for the incredible work.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz-Torres. Mr. Pretty.
Yeah, not much to echo my colleagues on this one. Nice job. It was very informative. I think that first choice IES, I think it'd be a field day for marketing. I think you can add IES onto everything too. But in any event, well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pretty. Our Vice Chair, Dr. Cannon.
All right, thank you. I agree with what's been said. I like your whole collection of names, and I very much like those, your two finalists. I will say, I think naming is a fascinating thing to do. And sometimes as you sit with names, they hit you differently. So when I first saw the two finalists, I thought Gateway was my favorite. But then just in sitting on it, I came to really, really appreciate innovation. And I do want to ask you a little bit about it. And I want to give you the example of Discovery Elementary, which is actually named for the space shuttle and John Glenn, but of course, most people probably hear it and assume it's a concept name, which is like innovation. And I would say in the case of Discovery, and I didn't like Discovery when I first heard it either, but I really like it now. And one of the reasons is because I think it really does the culture of the school and the perception and the way the students and everyone feel about their school gets defined by that name. And so I wonder, I saw your short description about innovation and what it means, but how do you see that playing out if we choose that name? How will it affect how you think about the work, especially Ms. Peters as principal?
That's a great question.
Late at night. I know it's after 10 o'clock. Thank you for staying with us this late.
No problem. I mean, it's a great question and something that we talked about as a committee. All of the planning units that are going to be coming to the new school are coming from Arlington Science Focus. They have a very strong background, I think, in in problem solving and in creative thinking and learning. And I think there's a real desire from the community to continue that kind of learning at the new school. And so I think the innovation really kind of goes along well with that idea of that problem-based learning, and really taking a question and a challenge and really looking at it from all different angles and seeing it all the way through. And I've been telling, the family groups that I've been meeting with, that, my passion is with collaboration and creative thinking, all those C's, right, and the communication. And I think that also fits really well with that idea of innovation.
Excellent. Thank you. I do really like it. And just, it's not going to affect this vote, but could you just remind me when you pick sort of school colors and mascot? Is that still forth? I know we don't vote on that either, but just remind us the timeline for that.
I think we're waiting on the name for everything. So I think we're a little bit, we're pushed a little bit further back than I think some other schools have been in terms of naming. So as soon as we can get this name in place, I think that's, one of the most important ways that we can begin to engage students in the process of really taking ownership over the school.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Grady.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon. And again, we want to thank you both for the informative presentation. And it really did give us a feel for all the things you went through to bring us two names. We will look forward to having a vote on your recommendation on March the 11th at our board meeting at that time. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear about proposed revisions to School Board Policy F-7, real property. Dr. Duran.
And for his very last presentation, and John, it's only 10:27. You're not used to it being this early for your presentation, probably. But for his last presentation with the school board at the end of the evening, as you were saying earlier, Chair O'Grady, Assistant Superintendent John Chadwick will present on this policy proposed revision. Mr. Chadwick.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. So this is a little confusing. Item F1, which is on policy F-7, real property. Next slide, please. The policy has two PIPs. PIP 1 is acquisition of real property, and PIP-2 is use and disposition of real property. Both F-7 and F-7 PIP-1 were substantially revised in consultation with legal counsel in 2015, but only minor revisions were made at that time to policy implementation PIP-2, procedure PIP-2, and that is the one that has had the most changes to it in this revision. Next slide, please. So what we've changed in the policy are some consistency of terms that has been improved, and terms have been updated to conform with current usage. Language regarding use of real property that is no longer applicable has been removed. Leasing real property from third parties has been clarified. Disposition of surplus real property has been clarified, and the requirements to dispose of real property at fair market value and to exchange property for property of comparable value have been added to the policy. Next slide. Policy implementation procedure F-7 PIP-1, acquisition of real property. The language has been revised to improve clarity. Next slide. Policy implementation procedure F-7 PIP-2, use and disposition of real property, as I just said, has been substantially revised. Language regarding reallocation, reassignment of administrative space and shared use of schools versus sports space that is no longer applicable has been deleted. And the policy implementation procedure has been rewritten to clarify implementation procedures for use of school board real property, temporary use of school board real property, temporary use of school board property by Arlington County government, a lease of school board real property to others, which establishes the requirement that such leases be at fair market value, sale of school board real property to others, and other real property actions. The old PIP had space standards for administrative offices and support spaces. We've deleted those and they are being included in the Arlington Public School Design Standards in accordance with the approved policy F-5.7, Capital and Maintenance Program, and policy implementation procedure F-5.7, PIP-1, Capital and Maintenance Program. Next slide. The superintendent is recommending that the school board approve the proposed revision to the policy F-7, real property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. I'd like to turn to Ms. Diaz-Torres to see if she has any questions or comments. Ms. Diaz-Torres?
I do. I have one minor question, or potentially more of a clarification, regarding PIP2. So first of all, appreciate all the clarification that was added to this PIP. There was a lot in the previous version, there was a lot that was unclear or that was no longer relevant. And so this just does a lot of work to clarify what our process is, which is really helpful. But in line 55 of the marked up version, we created a process for the superintendent to come to the board with recommendations for when we allow others to co-locate services for non-educational purposes. The question that I have is, what if an outside entity is asking to co-locate for an educational purpose? I know that we have organizations that provide tutoring and things like that who are co-located on APS property. Where would they fit in with this process, and where might they fit in here, or are they somehow missing?
No, they really haven't been missed. The first part of that paragraph that you're mentioning actually talks about other uses, and the school board is involved in approving those uses. And then there's a section later on that refers to temporary use of school board space, so owned by the school board, and they would be covered under that. The intent here really is that we bring to the school board that type of use. We have some that are legacy uses. We're happy to have them, but we don't really know how they happened. And we think it's really important that the school board be involved in these decisions, and that they be brought to the school board, and the school board all have the chance to weigh in on them and approve them.
Okay.
So there's a second paragraph in there that covers that. I'm going to have one more look at it to make sure it really makes sense, and we may make some minor amendments before we come for action or consent, and we'll let you know if we do that.
Okay, very helpful. I just want to make sure we do have those legacy programs, making sure that we are now not going to be in violation of the policy for those legacy programs until we can have if we want to have a conversation about their use of space, we can go through that process, but making sure that we're not accidentally creating a vacuum for them. That was my only question about this policy.
If I might add, I think the other thing is there are many really, really great organizations in our community who all might be deserving of space.
Yeah, and so we need to have a process for that.
We should have a process where it's weighed properly, and the school board should be involved in that.
Yeah, certainly, and where we can track all of it, and where we can understand, where we're not ending up in a situation where we don't understand where an agreement came about. Yeah, so I think with that additional clarification, if you could just take one more look at it, that would be really great. And if it is fully covered in the language that's currently there, then that would be great as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate the robust effort here, and I don't have any additional questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz-Torres. I'd like to turn to Mr. Goldstein, as I believe you're the only remaining member with a question, with possibly questions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, let me just pick up on this last conversation about legacy programs, and when would those decisions or decision points occur with current legacy programs? I mean, some of them have MOUs, or maybe all of them have MOUs or something. So when with this revised PIP would those programs or uses be brought to the board?
That's a really good question. And I think that the policy doesn't specifically cover those. They would be prompted by some change in circumstances. So for example, when we moved from the SciFax Education Center, or from the old Education Center to the new SciFax Education Center. That would have been a time to say we should be looking at what the arrangement is and what those MOAs say, and there may be things like that that happen in the future. It could conceivably be that at some point in the future we find that we desperately need the space that they're occupying, in which case that will be another time to get out the agreements that we have them and bring them to you for consideration.
So they're MOAs and not MOUs, right?
I don't know what they are. They're one or the other. We used to do MOAs and now we seem to do MOUs. I'm never quite clear what the difference is.
Okay, whatever they are, they've got some term.
Yes, I believe there are, and they go back quite a long way before my time at APS.
No, I mean, written in the memorandum of whatever it is a term that, you know, this MOA or MOU is good for a couple of years, 3 years.
I can't say that. I haven't reviewed them. But you're prompting me to suggest that we probably should take a look at them if you wish.
Because it seems, I know the couple I'm thinking of, I know do have MOUs with a term of agreement, term of use or something in there. And so it would seem to me logical that when that term expires, that's when the details of this this PIP would, you know, come into play.
They would take effect then, yes, because there would be a change. The period had ended, or was coming to an end, because we wouldn't wait till the end before we dealt with it.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. I think that those are all the questions we have at this time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chadwick, for making your last presentation to the school board. And this will come back to us at our March 11th meeting for a vote.
Thank you.
Our last information item is the Heights FY 2022 CIP estimated funding. Dr. Duran.
Thank you, Chair O'Grady. For this item, our Director of Design and Construction, Jeff Chambers, will be presenting this item. Mr. Chambers.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Duran. This is the Heights FY22 CIP estimate funding. Next slide, please. On December 17th, we brought to the school board, or the school board approved $115,109 for a design study at the Heights to support the FY22 CIP, and it was funded by Capital Reserve. Included in that design study is a cost estimate by a professional estimator by the design team. Since it is customary for APS to produce 2 cost estimates for a CIP project, a construction manager advisor must be hired to complete a second estimate. Additionally, staff is proposing that we set aside a contingency amount to fund any design or estimating additional work requested by the school board during the FY 2022 CIP discussions. If the fee for the additional work was below the contingency, board approval or additional board approval would not be required. Without a contingency, a fee for any additional work would require board approval. The proposed actions require the school board approval because the funding source is a capital reserve. Next slide, please. The recommended actions would be to approve the estimate to be performed by CBR Heery for a fee of $15,568, to approve the transfer of the $15,568 from the Capital Reserve into the Heights Building Phase 2 project, and to approve transfer of $30,000 from the Capital Reserve to the Heights Building Phase 2 projects as a contingency for additional work that may be required to support the FY 2022 CIP. That's the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chambers. With that, I'd like to turn to my colleagues to see if we have any questions or comments. Mr. Pretty.
Thank you. So the $115,109 from the design that was approved for the design study, all this money is included in that. Is that right?
The $115,000 is for the design team to put together the 4 options that they're looking at, as well as for them to contract with an estimator to estimate those 4 options. Generally, it's our practice to have a second estimate because essentially it's a conceptual estimate at that point in time. So we get 2 different estimators looking at it 2 different ways, and then we reconcile the 2 estimates to have the best estimate that we could have for the work that was intended.
No, you got it. Okay, but none of this is just a transfer of money. So this isn't anything above the 115,000.
This would be above the 115,000, correct?
Oh, it would be.
It would be above, yes.
Okay, you can come back to me if you don't mind, Chair O'Grady.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Pretty. Mr. Goldstein. Mr. Goldstein, I can come back to you if you would like. Let's move along to Ms. Diaz-Torres.
Sorry, I thought I indicated I didn't have any questions.
Oh, I do apologize, Mr. Goldstein. Thank you, Ms. Diaz-Torres.
Thank you, Chair O'Grady. So making sure that I'm building on Mr. Pretty's question, just to clarify and make sure that I understand. So on top of the 115,000 that has already been approved, this current request is for 15,000 for the estimate and for up to 30,000 as a contingency for any additional study. Just saying it in one sentence to make sure that I'm understanding what we're talking about here.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense to me. I don't have any additional questions about that. What I do want to note, and as we're thinking about these, when I'm looking at this in the context of all of the other conversations we're having in advance of our CIP, when we are planning to do these kinds of estimates in the future, let's plan for this additional estimate. I'm sure that in this case, it's because the plans have changed so much over the past year that we didn't have that already in the budget. But I think that the more that we can plan for this on the front end, the better, so that we can just give you all that contingency that you are going to need to do the additional estimates without you having to come and present to us at 10:43 at night and ask us for the additional funding. So the more that we can continue to build that the dollars in for the estimates or for costs that we can anticipate, I think the better. I don't have any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz-Torres. Dr. Cannonen.
Yes, and it is late, so apologies if I missed in your previous answers. I'm on the same sort of questioning topic here. If I missed this just very basic fact, or why, normally when we fund a project, this kind of thing is baked into the project. So when we approved the design studies, I think if you had asked me and said, but did you know there's a second estimate? I would have said, yeah, that's all baked into what we just funded. Why isn't all of this the contingency as well? I mean, generally, I feel like all of this is usually baked in from the beginning and we fund what you expect to do. So why is this different? And I see Mr. Chadwick also wants to respond, Mr. Chambers, but.
Sure, it was an oversight on our part. Typically for the CIP studies, we generally work out of a different fund. We aren't typically working out of the capital reserve. Because it's the capital reserve, every bit of funding we have to get approval from the board. Typically, if we're doing a capacity planning study, this is not adding capacity, so we weren't using that fund, which we typically use for most of the CIP study work. And it was an oversight on our part, and we should have had it in there, but we did not. But I think it was also helpful to be able to get the estimate when we had a better idea of what the 4 options were going to entail. So we got a better, I think, estimate from the CMA to do that estimate, but it should have been included with contingencies. And I agree, and we will make sure we do that when we're using funding such as this in the future.
I appreciate that. I very much appreciate that. Your transparent response.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Grady.
And thank you. And Mr. Chadwick, do you need to respond further?
I was just going to say exactly what Mr. Chambers was going to say, but I wanted to say it for him so he wouldn't have to. It was an omission. I should have picked it up too. But actually, we, you know, things change and our design studies have become more complicated than they have been in the past. And there's more weighing on them, bigger decisions weighing on them. So, you know, we've learned our lesson. I'm sure it won't happen again under new leadership.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say, Mr. Chambers, I know we keep talking about the project, but can you remind people what the project is?
Basically, it's a study to look at 4 options for the parking pickup and drop off at the rear of the the Heights building. We have 2 options to build a parking structure, one a full parking structure and one a partial parking structure underneath the field. And then the other 2 options are 2 variations of a temporary fix to provide the covered walkway from 18th Street to the building, as well as to possibly provide the pickup and drop-off spaces in the back of the building on the surface with a shortened field.
Okay, thank you. I was familiar and recalled, but for other people who may be watching, I was not sure that they would remember what it was we were trying to finish at the Heights, and the desire that we had to understand what the costs were for each of those options so we could determine with more clarity how we want to move forward with addressing some of the parking concerns at that site. So thank you for reiterating the project for those who may not have recalled. Mr. Pretty, I'm going to go back to you.
Yes, thank you. So who did the original design study? The 115,000?
They're still working on the design study. It's Stantec Architecture. They're in the process of working on the options, those 4 options for the CIP. And then they have an estimator that they have contracted with that will do an estimate of the work when they're finished. But we also typically get a second estimate from an outside estimator, so we make sure that the numbers are accurate when the board acts on the CIP this summer.
Okay, so this is the same contractor that did the Career Center?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pretty. I believe those are all the questions regarding this information item, and this will come to us for action at the next board meeting. Thank you very much, Mr. Chambers.
Thank you, Chair Grady.
Thank you. Yes, and that was our final info item. Board members, is there any new business?
No.
Hearing and seeing none, then this meeting is adjourned.